Today's video, I have the honor to be talking with Sam Sheether. He is an incredibly knowledgeable guy, strong ass guy too. So, and he's like by far one of the most articulate and well-spoken voices on this platform. So, really looking forward to having a discussion with him. And this is going to be a real treat for myself, and I hope it will be for you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Yeah. So one thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about, and part of it is because there's different voices out there and like different perspectives as far as like, natty, not natty, and what else is out there in the world. But for me, something I wanted to kind of ask your opinion on is the difference between naturally attainable versus naturally achieved. So for me, I feel like nowadays, so many people have just this incomprehensible amount of mental blocks of this dude's bigger than me, this dude is just a bit too big, like he's a bit too cut up, he's a bit too strong, and for whatever reason, because it's just out of what they think is possible, drugs is by far the default answer. And sometimes it's for things that are incredibly normal, I would say. Even myself, like I don't think that there's anything in particular that I do particularly well that like can cite steroid usage. I don't get steroid accusations that often simply because I have a bit more fluff to me. But for sure, like there are times when even with something like, as in my opinion, as simple and as intermediate as a 315 bench, where it's just like even that sometimes gets question marks, like you can do that naturally, and I'm just like, yes, of course you can. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, man, it's tough, right? Because it's like you can't just look at it. I mean, you can at a certain level, absolutely. I'm not delusional, right? It's like, yeah, you could look at like any guy on the open stage at the Olympia and be like, yeah, I know. So it's like at some point we pass this realm of like reasonable shadow of a doubt, right? But then you start getting into this gray area where there's potentially a little bit of debate, right? And it's like, is that a productive discussion to have? It's hard, right? Because some people are just like, that guy's big, impossible, right? And it might be impossible for you, but I think the first thing you need to acknowledge is just how much genetics can vary. I've met some people in my life that I would absolutely be like, yeah, no, I would have my suspicions, but I know them well enough to know that they are natural. And it's like, they've looked ridiculous since they were like a high schooler, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, so, okay, we have this great variability in genetic propensity for size, right? And we don't know exactly where the extreme ends of that are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we start, like you have to start with like, okay, there's this gray area, this guy might have needed PEDs to get this level of development, but that doesn't mean everybody does, right? Like we're really quick to say, look at these fucking genetic freaks that are in the NFL and in the NBA who just are so much naturally more gifted for their given sports than we are, right? You could say the same thing. Well, yeah, aren't there people who are equivalently outliers for hypertrophy? Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And you start getting into this part where it's like baseless speculation is that baseless. So it probably isn't productive, right? And you'll say you get these people who are like, oh, everybody at the upper level of any sport is on PEDs. Yeah, a lot of them are, right? But that doesn't necessarily apply to powerlifting one-to-one because there isn't state-funded doping, there
Mm-hmm.
isn't monetary incentive. So it's like, yeah, there are people realistically who cheat at the higher level of the IPF. That doesn't mean everybody is, right? Because like we talked about before this started, right? You could take John Hack, right? They're like, oh, he's an open IPF world champion. Don't you know that everybody who sets world records is on PEDs? And then John actually got on PEDs. And
Mm-hmm.
people were forced to kind of be like, well, I was wrong. And I was like, the only way that someone could truly prove it is to get really good. People are like, there's no way. And then you suddenly get way better. And you're like, you know why? You know why I just got better? It's because I just started taking steroids, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's the only way. And if that's the only way to prove it, right? It's like, is this a great discussion, right? You could take someone like pick your favorite guy who's often accused of being a fake natty, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing he can do. He can do a blood test, right? And you'd be like, well, yeah, you cycled off, goofy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that. Getting a blood test, like that doesn't mean anything, right? That just means
Mm-hmm.
a current status. It doesn't mean a lifetime status, which is true. Uh,
Yeah, definitely.
but the only thing he could do, hypothetically, is if he just fucking blew up, right? It's like you take your favorite speculative fake natty, he puts on 30 pounds of muscle out of nowhere. You're like, oh, I guess he might have been, right? So it's like, if that's the only way to prove it, maybe this isn't the most interesting thought discussion. And so it's like the only relevant thought discussion becomes, well, what could I do? And people tend to underestimate that, right? People have a hard time imagining. They're like, well, I'm a normal person. That person was born big. Not everybody was
Hmm.
born big. I think people underestimate if you had the habits of a very large, strong person for about 5 years, right?
Hmm.
Like you had this meticulous diet of eating 5 times a day with all this protein, you slept like a hoss, and you trained like an animal for 5 years. Most people underestimate how different what they would be as a person is with that
Yes.
accumulation of time. And we have a hard time wrapping our head around that. It's the same reason transformation pictures like really scratch this itch in our head of, wow, that's the same person. It's crazy. I can't conceptualize a person as kind of a static thing in time to a lot of us, just kind of intuitively, at least how I guess it, right?
Hmm.
So it's like we see someone who used to be fat and is now tiny. I can't wrap my mind around the fact that that's the same human. Or you take someone who used to be skinny and they got huge, right? And you're
Hmm.
like, that can't be the same person, right? So it's like I get this perception, right, where it's like, yeah, I am on the non-natty side of things, and that absolutely is a part of it. Could you be as big as me, or could I be as big as I am now? Probably not. Absolutely, right? Not, I'm going to get that out of the way. But people that get this perception that I was born a large person, I think because my brother was born a large person, right? But it's like, no, I entered high school at 115 pounds at 5'10". I made it about halfway through high school. I was about 145 pounds, 5'10", objectively a reasonably skinny guy. And I started lifting weights, and I bulked up. Like I was eating everything.
Hmm.
And by the end of high school, bulking up as hard as I could, I was like 175, 180. And then I worked my way through college, right? And it's like, yeah, eventually down the line, PEDs were introduced. But I think even on the natural side of things, people would question like, well, how'd you go from like rail thin to this level of strength, right? Because I don't think I ever have had that crazy of a physique, because that's not really where my genetic strong suit lies. Um,
Hmm.
but I got very, very strong. And I think a lot of people would be like, well, I can't wrap my head around that, like that level of change, right? And it's like, would I get to that bench press without having
Hmm.
objectively above average genetics? For sure, no. That's not what I'm saying, right? But it's just the difference between the start and the end that kind of triggers this response of like, I don't necessarily process this, and the only way I could explain for it might be PEDs.
Hmm.
So it's like, I think it's important to just start saying, well, it's like, try not to underestimate what 5 years of these habits could do. Is one
Right.
week of these habits going to make a big difference? No.
Hmm.
But Mitch Hooper in his podcast, the World's Strongest Man Competitor, recently said in his podcast, people underestimate or they overestimate what they could do in about 2 months, right? And
Hmm.
they underestimate what they could do in 10 years, right? And it's like,
Right.
that's just a platitude that sounds nice and we could say it, right? But it's like, on some level, I absolutely believe that's true, right? People think that they're going to bust ass for a month and they're disappointed that they're not suddenly strong.
Hmm.
But at the same time, they're like, oh, I'm born different than that guy. Maybe you were, absolutely, but there's a chance you weren't, right? And there's a chance that you're wrong, and it sucks that you're wrong, because now you're not going to become what you wanted to be because you believed it was outside your capabilities, right?
Hmm.
Is everyone capable of being a world record holder? No. But is everybody capable of a lot more strength than they think they are as a person? Yeah,
Most
usually on
definitely.
average, I
Yeah.
would say so. Working with, the guys I work with, most of them are the vast majority of them are natty, right? And it's like the level of strength that a lot of them get to are like these like flagship numbers that people on the internet are going to be like, ha, not natty. I'm like, I've seen so many people get to that landmark, and I know that they're not on gear. They're not lying to me. They're not
Hmm.
tricking me, their coach, you know. Uh, so it's like I've got documentable proof that this is achievable, and achievable by a pretty wide array of people. Not everybody,
Yeah.
for sure, but the chance that you fall into that wide array of people that it's within your capabilities is pretty high, right? So
Hmm.
it's like I think the risk of underestimating your genetics is greater than the risk of overestimating,
One hundred
right?
percent.
So it's like if you overestimate your genetics, you bust your ass for 10 years, and you're like, fuck, I guess I was never going to be a world record holder. You're still strong and jacked, right? You're like, you are still so developed, right? You're like,
Hmm.
I guess I wasn't capable of the absolute upper echelon. Damn. But I gave my best, and I'm at a point that's way ahead of a lot of people. On the other side of the coin, if you're like, well, I could never be strong, so I'm not going to try, you miss out on the possibility that maybe you even could have been reasonably upper echelon,
Yeah.
right? And if not, you still wouldn't even reach that level that the former guy did. And I understand that it's like kind of a two-bladed sword of like, you don't want to encourage people to have these unrealistic standards, right? And
Hmm.
it's like, that's definitely not lost on me, of like the whole like every Mr. Olympia guy claiming natty like 20 years ago and
Hmm.
people being so depressed about their results. right? Yeah, that
Right.
hurts
Yeah.
people, right? To like think that they're gonna get their natty, right? And it's like, I understand you can take it too far, but at the same time, it's my general philosophy. I would rather have someone err on the side of like I am capable of a lot, right? And it's
Yes.
like, because yeah, it's the cliche, but you shoot for the moon and you end up amongst the stars, even though the stars fall
Right.
on
Yeah.
you. It's like, yeah,
Because for
I don't
me,
know.
like,
That's I just
mhm,
I've never thought it was the most productive discussion. I know it's clicky and it's fun and people like it. And,
yeah.
it's like you can't get away from that to some degree. It's
Right.
why it's like I will never participate in that kind of thing because it's just like it's not the best use of your time.
100%.
Instead of asking is XYZ guy natty
Hmm.
and having a debate about it, how about you ask how do I get stronger
Yep.
and put the like refine your process. What am I doing wrong? It's like I know that's like obviously we're not all robots. We're not all constantly thinking beep boop bop boop. How do I self improve? Right, but
Hmm.
it's kind of the spirit of it. It's just like
Right.
what are
Hmm.
we doing here? Why are we so emotionally invested in this? And it's like I get it, because it's like fuck. Liver King made a post like recently where he's just like, oh, people accuse me of steroids, people accuse me of ab implants. Why does it even matter? Try hard. Well, it matters because it's kind of annoying that you're lying. You know,
Yes.
that's why
Yeah.
that's
It's the
why people
line
have
that like
it's
that's
kind of
getting up people.
it kind of is annoying. That's why it matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like so I don't want to sound like that guy where I'm not on the natty side of things. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, why does it matter, you natties, right? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to like let's direct our energy towards something productive, right? Because it's like I've got
Right.
all the respect in the world for high level natural athletes, whether they're pursuing hypertrophy or strength. I think objectively, it's probably the better option, right? It's like
Hmm.
you have to be a little bit of a goober to say, yeah, being big more important than health, right? It's
Right.
like
Right. It's,
objectively, if we write that down, that is correct, right? So it's like I got all the respect in the world for the people making the right call. It's
mhm.
just not the call that I'm making.
Right. Yeah. And like, so one thing that like kind of comes to mind too, like with this discussion is like how people like their expectations and whatnot. For me, like my brother actually was the more athletic and the more like like strength, power, skill, and like things like just naturally went to him more. And I was the fat kid who was like who just sucked at everything. Like I couldn't do a push up. I was like 300 pounds at 16 years old, but I was mad weak. Like even with a like being 300 pounds, I still couldn't bench more than like 2 plates. So like I was just like, fuck, I'm really not meant to be. I'm really not like I wasn't born to be strong. I wasn't born to be muscular. I wasn't born to be athletic. But I was just like, yeah, fuck it. I'll just try it anyway. And then just that like kind of mentality of saying like it doesn't really matter that I wasn't born for it. Like because it's humanly possible, I'm just gonna try to figure that out. Come to find out, like the habits, like as you mentioned, like 5 years of good habits, that also doesn't include the amount of times and trial and error process that it took to even develop those habits. So a lot of people like right now they're still when they are a beginner lifter, they're still very much in that developmental stage of like trying to get into those habits of a bigger, stronger lifter. And then once they finally cement it and then they put in those 5 years, that's when like great things happen. But so many people are just like, for whatever reason, until they get the best program, until they get told that yes, this is 100% achievable, which may or may not be the case, but why did that even matter to you if your effort is within 100% of your control? Then that just kind of almost bothers me to an extent because one thing I want to tell people is just like, hey, in your mind, you're either gifted or you're cursed. Like most people are average.
Yeah, it's a
And
bell curve, right? It's
yeah, it's
like
a bell curve.
statistically, you're somewhere in the middle, right? It's like the
Hmm.
chance that you are like everybody like when they don't see that initial explosion, right? And everybody's really bad with their assessment of their variables, right? It's like everybody's shocked when they start tracking their macros, how shit their macros are, right?
Yeah.
Or they're lying to themselves, right? It's
Uh-huh.
like they're like, oh wow, I am at a quarter of my target protein. Maybe that's why my gains have been mediocre. Maybe it's not because I'm left bell curve, right?
Hmm.
Statistically, the vast majority of people fall somewhere in that bulk of the bell curve, right? And it's like the capabilities of someone in the bulk of that bell curve are pretty impressive, especially for
Yeah.
strength, right? Because we talked about in the intro to this, like there is a bit of a disproportionate effect of like PEDs on strength versus size, right?
Hmm.
I would just, Greg Knuckles had a really good article kind of breaking down that like assuming a fixed body weight, like PEDs probably explain for about a 10% variance in strength, which people are like, that's not enough. It must be bigger, right?
Hmm.
And it's like, sure, it might be a bit bigger. Let's say it's all the way up to 15% for sure, maybe. But I do think that the difference between the best natural bodybuilder in the world is and the best untested bodybuilder in the world, there is a
Huge.
there's an unsurmountable gap there. It's insane, right?
Hmm.
Whereas I can just tell you, as someone who's been around powerlifting for a long time, I've met guys who are very, very strong natty. The gap between the best genuinely drug-free guys out there, even if you think that the guys that are the best drug-tested guys aren't the true best drug-free ones, the true best drug-free ones are still very good. Let's just say that is your belief. I respect that. That's fine, man. Like, but the true best drug-free ones are closer to the best untested powerlifters than their bodybuilding counterparts are. So we can just say,
Yes.
okay, well, there is this disproportionate effect probably on size, which is awesome because that means we can get gnarly strong naturally, right?
Hmm.
And it's like the capabilities of that bulk of the bell curve is something that a lot of people underestimate because it's like realistically, I don't know very many people who how the biggest bench press they ever hit was limited by their genetics.
Hmm.
The vast majority of people is because they didn't do it for long enough, or they didn't have very good variable management. They slept like shit. They trained like shit. Their technique was shit, right? It's like almost everybody I've met ran into a wall, and that wall wasn't their genetics. And they're like, well, this guy also has shit variable management and also has shit form, and he did 100 pounds more. Yeah, he does have better genetics than you, but you didn't hit that ceiling because of genetics, right? It's like, yes,
Hmm.
the game I'm playing is different than the game other people are playing. If someone said, well, I want to have abs, I want to be about 180 pounds because that's where I'm comfortable, and I want to see how strong I can get. I'm pursuing high level strength training, right?
Hmm.
The numbers are going to look different, right? We're going to follow the same process of dialing in the diet. We're going to follow the same process of optimizing the form, optimizing the training. We're looking for all these little 1%. Me being a guy who has gotten heavier and heavier and heavier with time, I put on over 100 pounds. I'm on the not natty side of things. The numbers scale differently, right? So it's like, yeah, for my demographic, an elite bench press is XYZ. And for that other guy's demographic, the bench press is a different number for
Hmm.
sure. Absolutely. But high level pursuit is high level pursuit, which is why I
Yep.
all the respect in the world for that guy. Like all the guys I coach that are natty, I have so much respect for them. I love those guys, right? I think they're smarter than I am in that regard, for sure, right? But it's like the cap that people hit is almost never their genetic ceiling, and it's like I don't know if I know someone who
Hmm.
it's like if I nitpicked what they were doing, they couldn't have got 5 pounds more on the bar over another year. You know, it's like yeah, you're never going to be the guy to beat Julius Maddox's record.
Hmm.
That sucks. I wish I was. I wish you were. I wish we all were.
Yeah.
That'd be a lot of fun, right? But it's like I do think that it's like people want to throw themselves on that left bell curve if they don't see this initial surge of success. And it's like a lot of the time that's misattributed, right? Because it's like that same
Yes.
person starts
Hmm.
tracking their macros, they realize they're way worse than they thought, right? Or
Yeah.
it's like they
Yeah.
start doing this and it's way worse than they thought. Or lots of people are delusional. That really upsets me, right? I've met people who I would definitely put on that left bell curve of strength propensity, right? And they're
Hmm.
still grinding it out. And I've got all the respect in the world because they're like, I want to do what I can do.
Hmm.
Awesome, right? And it's like, but I also have seen people who are like convinced that they're on that left bell curve side of things because their results indicate that. And they're like, I'm doing everything you are. I'm like, no, you're not. Your
Hmm.
technique is ass. Your technique is shit.
Yep.
Like, I don't
Hmm.
want to be mean to this. I'm never going to say that like outright because I want to encourage people. But it's like, I'm doing everything you are. Fuck no, you aren't. Like,
Hmm.
you skip meals. Even if you tell yourself, like, guys will be like, my diet's good. And if I was a fly on the wall in their house, it's not good.
Hmm.
It's wildly inconsistent. Maybe they nail it 1 in 3 days. 1 in 3 is that 33%. That's a failing grade by a lot. Like, no,
Oh
you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
nailing it, right? So it's like I do meet these people who are just delusional. They're like, I'm doing everything pretty well. Why am I not stronger? You're not doing it that well. Like,
Hmm.
and it's like that's part of the reason I think people are a little quick to throw themselves into that left bell curve area. And it's just like
Hmm.
I think some people are a little bit more pessimistic by nature, and it's like
Hmm.
um, it's like I think that fighting against that to some degree, right? Because it's like every pessimist likes to say that they're a realist, right? And it's like
Yeah.
I get it, right? Because it's like a lot of the time things realistically sound pretty negative. You say them the way they are.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, I will never be on the Olympia no matter how hard I try. Yeah, yeah. It's like I definitely, have found so much more propensity for strength for myself than hypertrophy.
Hmm.
I feel comfortable saying I don't think I could make it to be a top 10 bodybuilder in the world, no matter how much gear I took, right? It's like, that's not fun to say. It's much
Hmm.
funner to subscribe to this pull yourself up by your bootstraps, hard work is everything, genetics don't matter, right? It's like, it's
Hmm.
nicer to say that, but at the same time, I have athletes to where overcoming that like kind of more pessimistic view of training is what allowed them to start progressing again after a plateau. I have this guy I coach, his name is Noah. He's a really nice guy. I love Noah. And he had this hard plateau. He got very strong. You know, he pulled, I think he was in like the mid 500s, right? And he hit this hard plateau, and he was just kind of a more pessimistic guy. He was just like, I guess I wasn't born to be one of those guys, right? And he just started having more fun with training. It's like, you know, the question, like, it's like, you know, it's like this thing of you tell yourself, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. But the part that gets you going and gets you out of bed in the morning and gets you ready to bust ass and train hard and eat your meals is you have to be curious. You're like, but what if I can't? What if I'm
Yeah, what if I could?
what if I can? Right? It's like there was a period in time, right, where it's like I don't know if I could see myself benching 500. But what if I can? What if I am one of those guys, right? Like I'm gonna put 5 years lifting in and see if I get there. I got there, right? And it's when I bench 500. I don't know if I'm one of those guys who could bench 600, and I'm like, I'm closing in on it, right? It's like, what if I can, man? It's like if I hit 600, what if I can do more? You know,
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
Noah kind of started to be like coming to those sessions. It's like I'm here to work hard and have fun, and the results is what follows, right? And it's like that mentality could be taken too far. I've been guilty of that, where I'm just like, put in the work and expect nothing. Well, no, setting goals is productive to some degree, right? Like setting targets for yourself. I think you can sell yourself short by just being like, work hard and don't assess. You know, no, you need to set goals to assess whether what you're doing is working. You know, it's like I should be able to put 5 pounds in one training cycle at my level of lifting, and if I didn't, I need to assess. Whereas if I take that work hard and expect nothing in return, work hard for the sake of working hard, that's awesome. It's sustainable, but then you never know when to assess and when not to, right? You need to set benchmarks sometimes, right? And Noah was just like, he pivoted his mentality, and our approach to his training remained very similar. His technique remained very similar. Everything stayed about the same, but the mentality he would go into sessions with was different. And so the way he would execute them is different, right? So it's like guys on the internet, I notice a lot of the time fall into this case of like, well, what's wrong with my program, right? Or like, what's wrong with my nutrition? And it's like, no, you get 2 guys doing the exact same program with the exact same genetics. And, it should be obvious, but how you do the workout is going to significantly it's not just outside, or like, you know, you could say, oh, well, 2 guys do the same program, one of them goes home and he follows a well laid out diet and he goes to sleep, and the other guy doesn't. And you say, okay, well, the guy who has good variable management is going to progress for sure. But also there is big differences in how people execute the same exact program, right? And it's always like I see some guys from high school come into the gym and they're all working out together, and they got one of them is like the strong guy. You were probably the strong guy. After a little bit, and your friends started following you to school. I was the strong guy. You're like the kind of guy who inspires other people to come with him to the gym. Eventually they burn out, you keep going. I'm sure a lot of the guys watching, you are the one of your friend group that actually cares, because you're watching the YouTube videos to learn. They're not, they just kind of show up with you, and eventually they're going to stop showing up with you. Right? And it's like, almost always, they're like, yeah, that guy's got the best genetics of us all. He's the stallion of this group. Right? And it's like, I can watch those guys train, and I'm like, that is the only guy who's working hard. Hold on a minute. They're all convinced that like, oh yeah, Jimmy's a freak. And I'm like, no, Jimmy's the only guy doing hard sets. What the fuck is this? Jimmy's the only guy with decent technique. Jimmy's the only guy who watches YouTube videos to get better, right? You know, so it's like, I don't know. It's I definitely think that like the execution of the program itself is going to be a huge determinant. And the mentality with which you approach the training is one of the biggest things that's going to predict how you like go about doing that session. So it's like that is just as viable of a way to overcome a plateau as changing the program or changing your nutrition or changing your technique. And Noah has just been this extremely cool example where he went from 550, he just hit 600 this block. His knees were slightly soft, but that is his fault. That's not my fault. But he locked it out. It's a training PR, and he's overcome this plateau. And it's like, and he has the momentum to keep going. It wasn't like this, like, oh, training is self-harm. I'm going to go hard from this place of negativity, where it's like, that's inherently unsustainable. To get really strong, you got to do this for 10 years. You train because you hate yourself. What happens when you stop hating yourself, right? You get a nice girlfriend, your life is good. Like, your training motivation is gone. Nowhere to be found. I've lost so many clients over the years for getting a girlfriend.
Right, because like that forbidden pre-workout is not there no more. But no, there's a couple things that like you mentioned that like are really interesting that I kind of wanted to touch on. Like for example, like this is a bit further back, but you know how you said like there's like a 10 like at controlled body weights, there's like a 10% difference between the tested versus untested powerlifters, and the distance between like tested versus untested bodybuilders is much larger. But that kind of makes me think like that is a good, at least starting point for reasoning as to why if you're natural you should get as strong as possible, because like your strength potential is much higher than you think, and with size being so closely correlated to strength, that should invite you to think like I should get stronger, I should be lifting weights, I should be doing these things. And even if I don't get that initial boom or that initial burst, first and foremost I think it's kind of weird, like, you know, I think we kind of treat it as a joke if someone were to go up to you after you just bench like 315 405 or something like that, and then you say, oh well, it all started in my mama's womb. Like we think that like that's like joking with us. Like they think they're like giving us a shit story. Like but for whatever reason we act as if that tends to be the case, when in reality it really is those habits. It really is the years of putting in the work. So um bringing that up kind of leads me into the discussion of like power building. And for me, like
I'm here to defend it. I'm bringing it back. I was so sad because I watched your videos and
mhm,
you were on the Power Building Express, and
yep,
it's like,
yep.
you know, I understand the criticisms of powerlifting or power building. They're not
Mhm,
lost on me, right? But I'm
mhm,
like, this guy's doing what I'm doing, right? And it's like we just choose to call it power building. It's an
yep, mhm.
arbitrarily selected name that kind of conveys a general idea. And like what you do is different than what I do for sure, right? But it's like it's a general category. And then you left and you were like, power building is fucking dumb and fake. And I was like, no, no, I thought I had an ally. Yes.
Right, yeah. So I did like, yeah, I went on this like adventure of like, you know, talking with a bunch of other people, and then like really figuring it out and looking at the like a different worldview, because that was really the intention of my channel. I like one thing I remember hearing this from somewhere or reading it somewhere, and this is the more you say the more likely you're going to be wrong. And I took that as like I took that as like an invitation. I was like, cool, I'ma just say all my shit on the
Oh,
internet
I've done
and
the
wait.
opposite. I'm like, I'm so scared. I'm just like, I am only gonna say shit I'm reasonably confident in. I'm like, God, I'm avoiding that at all costs,
Mhm,
right? Because it's like, you know, it's like I think Paris talked about this recently, where he's just like, changing your opinion is a good sign. It means you're actually intellectually honest and you're looking for truth rather than consistency. I'm guilty as fuck of looking for consistency. You know,
mhm,
it's like it is a logical fallacy, but I'm like very careful with like how I'll word things because I don't want to have to go back and be like, I've changed my opinion, you know.
right.
But yeah, no, I definitely think it's been interesting to follow, right? And I think that's why your channel is as popular as it is. Is like we were talking about earlier. You almost have that kind of everyman appeal, where it's
Mm,
like you're stronger than the majority of the people watching. So
mhm,
it's like you're absolutely, and you've been doing it for longer. You put a lot of thought into it, so you're absolutely in a position to give sound advice to people who are like intermediates, low level advanced guys, right? It's like you are in a position where it's perfectly justified to say that, but you're not so far away in what you're doing from what they're doing that it doesn't seem like you're doing the same thing anymore, right? So
mhm,
it's like I understand why people might write me off. They're like, well, this guy is choosing to pursue kind of a variation of what I'm doing that's just so different. I just want to get jacked and stacked and stay natty and
mhm.
be healthy and live a long time. I might not live a long time. That's my prerogative. What I'm doing is just chasing maximal strength because I'm curious. I want to see
Mhm,
what I can do. Right. And
mhm,
it's like I'm an idiot, right? I get it. And what I'm doing is so different and so not relatable that I get it, right? Whereas like I think that you're in this awesome middle ground of like you are someone that people can see them. They're like, I could be like that guy, right?
mhm.
You know, and it's like it's been cool to see. I was like, no, he's forsaken it, you know, because
Yeah,
it's like
yeah. But
because
I did
you know
come
I
back to it.
my man. Well, that's what, honestly that's why I messaged you to do this. I was like, he's back on the power building train. Let's go,
Mm,
baby. Well,
yep,
because it's like
yep.
you know, it's like I never understood some of the arguments. I think some of them are just don't make sense. Like the arguments against power building, I think they're stupid. And then some of them, I think, are perfectly sound, but they are misrepresenting what the majority of reasonably smart people that like power building are
Mhm,
doing.
mhm,
So it's like option one is a point I've heard for a couple of years now. I've been around the space for a while, you
mhm.
know, because I've been lifting for like a decade, right? And it's like I am young enough that YouTube has been around for the entirety of my lifting career. It was in like powerlifting YouTube or strength training YouTube was in its infancy, but it was still around, you know. And I've seen
Yes.
the point raised for a long time now that okay, well, power building isn't real because all powerlifters are doing isolation work with the intention of hypertrophying relevant muscle, right? You know, we know that one of the single biggest predictor of strength on a lift is the cross-sectional size of the primary movers. So that stands to reason that if our goal is to increase the bench press, one of the most potent strategies we have is increasing the cross-sectional area of the chest, triceps, and shoulders. And so it's like, of course, power lifters, even the ones who lean pretty heavily into specificity, have accessories. They do like belt squats. They do like, it's like varies from coach to coach. Even like the high specificity guys are doing, you know, hypertrophic focused rep ranges on those main lifts, or variations of those main lifts that lend themselves to hypertrophy. So maybe the big arch wide grip bencher that everybody on YouTube hates, that guy is also probably doing some feet up close grip work
Exactly.
because he's trying to grow muscle, right? So it's like, and they're like, oh, well, you know, the guys in the 80s did power building. These guys now don't do power. Yes, they do. I've been around a ton of really good, untested and really good tested powerlifters, strongmen. All of them are doing something in their workouts for hypertrophy. That hasn't changed. That's not some forgotten old school methodology, right? So they say, okay, well, power building is not a real thing because everybody is doing hypertrophy. I think that's a pretty bad argument, to be honest with you, right? Because we, you know, like you're on this whole like anti-optimal train, right?
Yep.
And optimal is probably a different thing for everybody, especially if we factor in psychology, right? Because you can, you know, the biomechanics of an exercise might be suboptimal, but if you love it, you're going to work hard at it consistently. That might be approaching optimal for you, right? So maybe we don't know what this definite optimal is, like the biomechanics crowd might say, where they say, well, optimal is determined solely by biomechanics. And guys in our space are like, no, psychology plays a role in that. Training goals play a role in that, right? So it's a little bit more complicated than just this is optimal based on biomechanics. But optimal for a person, it probably exists, right? We can't guess what it is, but we can go better and worse. You know, you could say,
Definitely.
okay, my training, I had worse training in the past. I have better now. That suggests there's something that we're moving toward that we could call optimal-ish for our goals, right? This concept of vaguely optimal bodybuilding training and this concept of vaguely optimal powerlifting training aren't the same thing. Nobody with two brain cells thinks that optimal, I mean, there are people that do, but they really don't know what they're talking about, that think that optimal training for a 1RM squat, bench, deadlift is the same thing. Like, good bodybuilders don't do powerlifting training. Good powerlifters are doing a hell of a lot of things that a powerlifter, bodybuilder never would, right? It's like they're, in my personal opinion, I don't find if your goal was purely hypertrophy focused, I don't think there's any real reason to train in that 1 to 5 rep range, right? Because it's like people, oh, a strength phase will help you lift more to potentiate more hypertrophy. You can cycle your rep ranges without ever entering that 1 to 5 range where we start to get a fall off in hypertrophic effect. A set of 6 is pretty heavy, right? A set of 6 is plenty heavy to facilitate really solid neural strength gains, right? So it's like, if we have this idea that 5 to 30 is the rep range where if we have a similar proximity to failure, we're going to see about the same amount of growth, right? What makes sense, if we want to periodize bodybuilding training, we could start up towards 15 reps and taper down towards 6. So we have a built-in strength phase to potentiate more forward neural adaptation if we believe that that's something that's important, which I know a lot of people would push back on. They're like, well, no, you can stay up in that 15 rep range if you're staying progressive overload, you're staying progressive overload. But I know a lot of people will like to say, like, no, do a strength phase because then you're going to be able to lift more for the sets of 15. Doing sets of 6 is going to let you lift more for the sets of 15, and they aren't hypertrophically a waste of time, right? And it's just like it's disproportionately taxing for no return, right? So it's like we could take something down to 6 reps, right? So the way I see it, right, is like, no, the powerlifting and bodybuilding aren't the same thing, which means that if we have these vague optimals on each end, training somewhere in the middle, where, okay, well, it's not I'll acknowledge this is not the optimal way to get a 1RM squat, bench, deadlift, but this also isn't the optimal way to maximize muscle hypertrophy. There's somewhere in the middle that some of us, our goals might align with not being all the way to one side or the other, right? So we have this swath of training where we have two goals. We want to be big and strong, right? Instead of big or strong, right? So it's like, it must be a thing. It must describe this middle ground between the two, right? Because it's like, oh, bodybuilding or power building is just powerlifting. No. There's no reason to do 15 sets of biceps a week. That's not like, maybe doing 1 or 2 could help your elbow health or stabilize your bench press. Maybe, sure.
Yeah.
But there's no benefit to powerlifting doing 15 sets of biceps. if I want big arms and I do 15 sets of biceps, suddenly my training is different than true powerlifting because I have this side objective. Yeah, I want a big squat bench deadlift, I want big biceps, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
it must exist, right? So I don't like that argument at all. I think it's right. And then the other argument I hear, and this might just be because I am in my own echo chambers of more strength. Like I'm more on the strength side of things. I compete in only strength sport. I don't compete in physique sport. But the point I hear is like people saying, "Oh, well, power building isn't optimal for hypertrophy." I don't think people who do power building are claiming that it's superior, or at
Mm-hmm.
least the intelligent ones, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there is the dogma of big heavy compounds are the only way to grow, right? And it's like realistically, I don't think there is that much evidence to support that, right? I think that like what basement bodybuilding does, it's like yes, he doesn't have strength goals. It's better to be able to localize fatigue by leaning into maybe more isolated lifts, right? Where it's like we probably get this less total like neural taxation, which means we're going to be able to do more, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be able to do way more sets of rows than we are going to be able to do sets of deadlifts because they are less globally taxing. And if our only goal was hypertrophying lats, it's like I think you'd have a pretty sound argument that doing the more targeted lift is going to be better if your only goal is hypertrophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that. I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think that this idea of like you need big heavy compounds to grow as much as you can isn't quite as true as people think. It's
Right.
like if you go and train with a genuinely high intensity on these smaller lifts, they are more than enough to disrupt homeostasis and drive growth, right? It's like, no, you don't need to do 4-plate close grip benches to grow your triceps. If you go and you train like a maniac on some overhead cable extensions, your triceps are going to grow. You're not just going to get dwarfed by the guy who does nothing but dips.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. It's not a reality. It's not really based in that much factual. It was just a dogma that was around 10 years ago. So I guess I get where those guys are coming from because they're just pushing against this annoying notion that like, oh, what you're doing is pussy training. You need to do raw squats. It's like, no, you can do insanely hard training on a hack squat. That's
Mm-hmm.
probably a bit better for growing your quads on a set to set basis because you don't have to worry about technique. You don't have to worry about your lower back being the limiting factor. You don't have to worry about balance. You can focus on what is my quad's proximity to mechanical failure and just take it there and you can go crazy hard. That's not soft training. That's
Mm-hmm.
really hard, right? So it's like I get the annoyance with people saying you need to bench press. No, you don't, right? But that being said, most of the people that I think are reasonably articulate that advocate for power building training say that they like power building training because they want to be big and strong.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been kind of my philosophy is like when I started lifting weights, I got strong quickly because that is my genetic propensity. I like to think that I put a lot of thought into it, put a lot more thought into my peers. And when I first started, I was all in. I was eating 6 meals a day right away because that's just what I read you had to do. I was a
Mm-hmm.
maniac, right? And I've maintained being a maniac since then because it's just I really enjoy it. And I'm just like, I'm confident that when you put what I do in my efforts to get stronger, it beats most people. I've set up my life in a way where I selected a job that would facilitate good training. And I got strong very quickly and I didn't get big as quickly. So the story of most of my career is people would come up to me, they're like, bro, it's crazy that you bench 3 plates while you're that small. And I'd be like, it wasn't cool to me. I was like, ow, what?
Mm-hmm.
No, I want to
Right.
be
Right. That
big.
hurts.
I want to be big and strong. It's
Mm-hmm.
like obviously I want to be strong. I love lifting heavy. Strength training is my bread and butter. But I also want to look proportionate to
Look
what
the
I
part.
am
Yeah.
strong.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't have abs anymore. To me, I want to look strong. I want someone to look at me and know that guy is probably pretty strong. That's my
Mm-hmm.
main goal, right? And it used to be not the case, right? So it's like I would lean into more hypertrophy training, and I got up to a 365 bench. People like, it's crazy that you bench 365 with such small arms. Fuck. And then I benched 405. And people are like, oh my god, you're so strong for your size. I was like, fuck. Okay. It wasn't a cool thing. I wasn't like, yeah, man,
Mm-hmm.
I'm crazy powerful for a
Right.
small
Right. It's
guy.
just like.
I want to be a big guy. If I could
Mm-hmm.
choose between being a small and a big guy, I choose being a big guy. That's why I've been force feeding for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
And it's like finally over time, I started like adapting my training and resting a little bit more. And PEDs were introduced, you know, after that 405. I like to put
Mm-hmm.
that out there. Thank you very much. And I'd like as down the line, I started looking more like along the lines of what I was, and just my emotional reaction to being told you're crazy strong for your size. I was like, well, this kind of reaffirms in my head that my goal is also to be big,
Right. There's
Part of
a
that is
size
because
component.
I have some numbers that I would like to hit. Where I'm not aiming for relative strength. I think relative strength is cool. I don't like that my fellow fat guys are like, oh, fuck your formula. Bro, if you're benching 400 at 400, that guy
Yeah.
benching 365 at 165, he is way better at bench pressing than you. Yes, you're stronger. I get it. That's not what the word stronger means, right? But and they're like, relative strength is for pussies. I'm not saying he's relatively stronger. He is better at bench pressing, right? And it's like I don't like that I attract some of those guys who shit on lifters. All the respect in the world. My goal was just like, I want a big number. I want a big number. People ask me how much you bench. Oh, I'll say a really big number. So it's like, and to do that, I realized I needed to be a big guy, right? So my training was always kind of like had that footnote of like how I'm training right now might not be how I trained once I'm roughly the size that I need to be. I think I probably need to keep pushing up towards about 300 to hit the kind of numbers I want to hit. And then my training might look a little bit more strength specific. But to do that, I need a lot more cross-sectional area. So for the last 10 years, I'm like putting on cross-sectional area to set myself up for those lifts down the line is just as much a part of it as getting stronger, right? So it's like, you've mentioned in the past, you love Brian Alsrew. I love Brian Alsrew. It's like, I like that idea that your physique is a byproduct of your training, right? Because it's like performance is cool.
Exactly.
And so, so it's like for me, that's kind of how I always rationalize it. Is like because my goal is being a big guy, so then I can set myself up for these absolute loads that I want to eventually lift, right? It's like I like to think I could have been a very good 198 lifter, could have been a good 220 lifter, right? But it's like that wasn't the goal. The goal was just a big number, and to do that, I needed to get a lot bigger. So my training is going to reflect that, and I would say that most people who look at my training are like, "Wow, that looks a little bit odd for a strength athlete," because that is what I am. I compete in strongman, but there is more bodybuilding work here than you might expect compared to some of my peers. It's because I need to get bigger because my goal is, these absolute lifts. So it's like similar reason to you, where it's like, okay, well, I've come to this reality that I have goals in terms of muscle mass that aren't just, okay, well, there's a certain amount of muscle mass I need to like improve my lifting, right?
Yeah.
I've got these two goals, which means my training needs to be somewhere in between. And that's kind of where I've come to, where I was like, that was why I was so sad to let the powerbuilding train, because I was like, I think it's perfectly reasonable. That's what I think.
Yeah, and then so what brought me to power building the first time? So like when I first started training and whatnot. So I remember there was a day where I actually met someone who was substantially stronger than myself despite being much smaller. And I was just like, man, fuck that. Like I was like, I want to be strong as shit. I want to and then there was another time where a guy was just like much bigger than me and much weaker. And then there was some time, and then I was working out with some of my coworkers, and they're just like, it's like, wow, like that guy's so much smaller than you, but he's so much stronger than you. And then there's the other guys just like, wow, he looks so much better than you, but you're stronger than him. What's up with that? And I was like, man, fuck this. So in my mind, because I was very young, I was like 18, 19 at the time, and I just told myself, all right, bet, like this is my goal. I'm not gonna let a bodybuilder be stronger than me, and I'm never gonna let a powerlifter look better than me. So I was just like, I got to be somewhere in between for that. Like I have to be somewhere between both of those. And then my training kind of like took a form of what I call power building now. And then so what brought me back to power building was the fact that I kind of had what I would assume to be, or what I assessed to be, a better understanding of both of strength versus size. And what I came to realize is that, first and foremost, are there differences between optimal bodybuilding training and then optimal powerlifting training? Most definitely. But do those differences eliminate the middle ground? Of course not. And then, so with one of what you mentioned as like one of the main arguments against it is that power building isn't real. And then, so I kind of like thought about that and like kind of broke it apart. So when we talk about power building isn't real, what are we actually saying? So we're saying things like a wide variety of different compound movements, getting stronger and progressively overloading on that variety of compound movements for each muscle group. And I was just like, those are very real things. Whatever we decide to call them is most definitely arbitrary, but it doesn't make it any less real. So me calling it power building, me calling it old school bodybuilding, me calling it old school powerlifting, like none of those things eliminate like the training methodology of it. So I'm just like, that's just like, all right, cool. That's one. And then for the other part being power building isn't optimal. Well, if your goal is size and strength, And if we are always like on the train of like specificity, you have to be as specific towards your goal. And to assume then that there isn't some, and I wouldn't even call it a middle ground, because it's not necessarily like two opposing things. It's one thing done properly. It's one thing. And um, to say that because it incorporates multiple things, like first and foremost, is like, it's kind of saying, like the analogy that I use in my head is like for boxing, like you have your left and right hand. You might rely on one or the other to kind of set up your best combos and your knockout punch, but at the end of the day, you do need both. It's not like you're going to be the best in the world with one-handed boxing. And so to kind of say that it isn't optimal because you're using two tools, it's like, well, like think of anything where like try eating a really complex meal with just one implement, like
Yeah.
Asians, like, shut up. I know we use chopsticks, but spoons and forks. We're like, this is America right now.
Hey, there's something you're gonna have to cut eventually.
Hmm.
Knives exist in Asia.
Right. So like when it comes to um just how, and I can edit any, like, if I like fuck up my chains of thought, because I do that quite often. But anyway, so when it comes to like power building and whatnot, one thing that also kind of came down to me was the pragmatic side of things. So when it comes to pragmatism, a lot of people think like the definition of like being pragmatic is things are only as true as they are useful. And I think that's very like a service level like mischaracterization of pragmatic thought, because for me pragmatism is just like what are the underlying habits that form from the understanding that is shared. And when it comes to a lot of the things that people would talk about from different sides of things, so basement bodybuilding, natural hypertrophy, looking at a lot of what they would advocate compared to someone who does have a big lifting bias, the amount of overlap between them is so much larger than any amount of difference, where um, it just indicated to me that whatever is encapsulated in that can be called literally anything, but it's a very real and it's a very effective way to train. And to and if your way of training is effective and then you apply your own psychology to it and it agrees with your psychology, why wouldn't it be optimal? So, like, that's why for me, like, I look at some people with impressive physiques, like doing nothing but cable work, machine work, and whatnot, and I would just find that so mind-bogglingly boring that I actually would stop training. And
Yeah.
as a result, that is the most suboptimal way to train. In this
Yeah.
very,
Exactly. Well, no, it ties into what we were talking about earlier, right? Which is like, what is the limiting factor on 99.9% of people's bench press? It's not the genetics, right? The
Mhm,
limiting factor on how big somebody gets usually isn't how optimal their training was. It was how long they did it for. It was the
mhm,
fact, it wasn't the exercise selection that made them never reach the level that they should have usually. So like, yeah, there are some people who are doing a lot of things well, and that is the change that would get them the gains they want. More power to you, and that's why I'm glad people are putting the exercise, the info out there, because maybe there is a guy who's just like, man, I've been going so hard on my close grips and like blah blah blah, and it's just like I'm not getting what I want. And they see these posts and they're like, hey, let's try to lean into really high intensity training on these more isolated motions, and that's what gets them. Sure, but that's not most people. I would say most people ultimately are head back because they quit lifting too soon, right? So it's like,
mhm,
yeah, if that is the most common limiting factor, not optimal biomechanics of the exercise, then optimal really should be what's going to keep you in the gym the longest and keep you working hard the longest. Because it's not just being in the gym. We all know that old guy who's been going to the gym for 20 years who is still horrendous at lifting weights because he goes through the motions and never hits a threshold of difficult enough training to move forward, right? So it's like not just what's going to keep you in the gym, but also what's going to keep you working hard, right? It's like we said, like optimal is going to have an intersection of like, yeah, mechanics, it's going to have an intersection of psychology, because it's like realistically the most common limiting factor isn't the biomechanics. The common limiting factor is persistence and effort. And some exercises just psychologically, like you said, you're not going to go get amped up and you're not going to nail your nutrition the day before a cable workout.
mhm.
It's like if you've got some big weight on the bar, let's say you're doing some beat the books, style training. Fuck, I did 6 reps last week and it was hard as shit. I need to do 7 tomorrow. I'm worried about it. And that little bit of worry is what makes you eat all the meals the day before that you were supposed to eat on your plan. And it makes you go to bed early. And that's like keeps you go hard, keeps you in the gym, and keeps you accountable with your variables. It's like that would be optimal for you, right? You're not going to do those same things for the cable workout. Whereas, like, basement bodybuilding fellow. I don't know his name.
Oh,
He seems like a
Landon,
cool guy.
or like I don't know. Like
Land
I think he'll be okay with me saying it. Landon. Yeah,
Landon. Yeah,
yeah,
he like it's like he enjoys that style of training because he likes the idea that what he's doing is optimal because it is for his goals. I really do
yeah,
believe
yeah.
that it's. I don't disagree with him, right? And that gets him fired up. Is like he's going to be able to mentally commit to training that he believes is optimal. And he would be like, well, no, I can't go get fired up to go do some like heavy, shitty skull crushers because in the back of my head, I would know that what I'm doing is suboptimal. And that's what would like kill the motivation for him. Perfectly
Mhm.
valid. You and me are meatheads. I don't
Yep.
want to throw around something heavy. I'm really excited to do that. And that's what keeps me coming back and going hard, right? And it's like, training doesn't always have to be optimal, right? That's why I thought you were kind of leaning into like the silver era bodybuilding stuff for a bit. That was interesting because I think that it's um, not controversial to say that that's suboptimal for anything, right? I
Mhm.
don't think that is the optimal training methodology for like any real goal. That being said, if you love that style of training, it's cool that like, no, I train the way I am passionate about, and this is what it's got me to, right?
Mhm.
There's a power lifter I follow. His methods, they're terrible. I mean, like
Mhm.
on paper, they're terrible, right? It's
Mhm.
just like he's just like I'll come into the gym, I hit one all-out set of like 8 different leg exercises, and I go home, right? And it's like he loves training like that. It's badass. It's cool to
Mhm.
watch. He's slamming some heavy hack squats for a set of 6 for no reason, you know. And it's like that's how he trains. It's badass. That's how he trains. Like he's passionate about it. I don't think he's claiming it's optimal. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh my god, that motherfucker squatted 800 like that too. So it's like it's almost
Damn.
cool to see what result you can get with the methodology that you're passionate about, right? So it's
Mhm.
like if you're really passionate about these like full body, high volume workouts because it keeps you in shape, you feel good moving through space, you just feel good. You're like,
Mhm.
this is my training methodology. Fuck whatever. Like I don't. My goal is to train. I love training, right? Kind of like how I am. So it's like
Mhm.
silver era training is what scratches that itch. It's almost cool to see. Well, I have this cool physique that also I'm like I've got a ridiculous work capacity,
Mhm.
right? So it's like it's cool to see what you can accomplish, especially if the training is the goal itself,
Mhm.
rather than always obsessing about optimal.
Right. And that's why like there is another there's two other arguments that I hear when it comes to power building. And the first like one that kind of comes into mind with what we're talking about is that power build like I remember this from Mike Isotel. He said like okay, here's the issue with power builders. When do you compete? And I'm just like, well, first and foremost, the way I train is I train the way I train because I love training. I love like a wide variety of different exercises. I love this. I don't need to have some competition out in the world that reflects whatever my training method is to exist for my way of training to be valid or to be even effective. So when I first heard that, I was just like, that's like,
Yeah, I
yeah, it's just
love
like, what
Mike.
the hell? Like,
I
I
love
love
Mike. I
my,
don't love that argument, but
yeah,
yeah, like
yeah.
I love the guy. I think that's a poor
Hmm.
argument. Shit, you could say, oh, well, you're a power builder. When do you compete? Twice as often as you do, because I could do 2 sports. What the
Hmm.
fuck? Like, are we not allowed to do 2 different disciplines? Right? It's like if someone said, yeah, no, I like keeping myself in good shape for running distance, and I
Hmm.
also like bodybuilding. When do you compete? When are you gonna run while shredded? I can
Right.
do both,
Yeah.
you ding dong. I have a season where I run, and I see like I
Mhm.
I don't want to call Mike a ding dong. Mike's a lot
Fair.
smarter than
Yeah,
I
yeah,
am.
yeah.
I don't need people who love Mike informing me that he's smarter than me. I know, but yeah, I don't think that's a great point. Because it's
Hmm.
like A, you got the option of competing in 2 activities,
Hmm.
and B, you don't have to compete in anything if what you love is the training. And that's kind of
Right.
always how I've been. I boxed for 8 years straight, and I trained twice a day, 7 days a week, which I shouldn't have. And like it's just like I was a madman, right? I woke
Hmm.
up before high school every single morning. I woke up before middle school at 5 in the morning to go
Hmm.
run 3 miles before school every day, and no one was making me do that. My coach didn't even tell me to do that. I
Hmm.
just thought I was like, oh well, boxers do road work. That's what you do,
Yep. Hmm.
right? And it's just like I love training, right? And it's like at no point did I ever compete. I
Yeah.
think I could have done quite well considering I started at 9 years old, right? So it's like, yeah, if I'm fighting other 15-year-olds, very few other 15-year-olds have been doing this for 6 years. I think I could have
Hmm.
been quite competitive. I think I could have done something cool. Never even crossed my mind. I was just like, I run, I spar, like this is
Hmm.
my training. I train. I know it's
Yeah.
what I do.
And
That never
it's
it
also,
never
okay.
really crossed my mind. It's the same thing with lifting. It just doesn't cross my mind. I'm like, yeah, I want to see if I can do it at 900. People are like, well, are you going to do it in the platform? No, maybe. I don't know. Like
Hmm.
that just wasn't the goal. Or people are like, it doesn't count. I don't care. I want to see if I can pick up. it's the curiosity that drives me, right?
Hmm.
It's like
Definitely.
I don't say like I want to show everybody that I can deadlift 900, and people say, well, you have to do it to the standard that other guys have done 900 to, which I understand. Like you want an apples to apples comparison because gym lifting is not always the same as competition lifting.
Hmm.
Because you have the flexibility of, oh, I'm having an off day, I'll just do it tomorrow, right? Like that's big, and also. I think that more experienced lifters will know there's certain things you can look for that don't look really obvious that are going to artificially inflate your lifts, right? So it's like
Hmm.
I can see guys on Instagram who are kind of chasing some views, who like maybe they put a bumper inside their deadlift, right? That is
Yeah.
that is not the same thing as a lift on kilos. The amount of flex in the bar, not the same thing, right? So it's like yes, 900 on that pound plate setup is still wicked strong, but also that guy who did 900 bare hand, not in straps on kilos, is even stronger than you by a
Hmm.
decent margin, right? There's a big
Hmm.
difference, and people who don't know what they're looking at might not know that, right? And they're kind of taking advantage of the fact that most people are beginners and they
Hmm.
don't know that 900 deadlift A is not the same thing as 900 deadlift B. And I get that, right? You'll see guys will film their bench from an angle where they're hovering their ass slightly off the bench, making it into a little bit of decline, just to lift as much weight as they can. And they're
Hmm.
hiding it. They know that they're doing an illegal technique, but it's inflating their gym numbers. You'll see. I'm trying to think of what other like jumpy pauses on the bench, but I think we could all see that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like filming a squat from a dubious angle, right? Uh, Strong men who constantly deadlift in suits and never really acknowledge the existence of suits or the fact that they're getting 100 pounds out of them. The
Hmm.
use of really long figure eight straps where it's down in your fingertips, right? And you're
Yep.
effectively completely changing your leverages, right? So it's like all of that's true, and that's why I understand the whole. Oh well, it's you can't
No,
compare
no,
it to
no.
that other.
Hmm.
You can't go do it in the gym and be like, I'm the same as those guys, because you're not.
Hmm.
But that being said, if you just select a standard for yourself and you're internally motivated, you're not trying to prove to other people you can. I'm curious if I can pick up 900. I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna do it in straps. I'm gonna do it on pound plates because it's easier. And like as long as I acknowledge that, right, and I'm not trying to compare apples to oranges, it's fine.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, sure, you don't think it counts. I do not care. I never said it counted, right? Like I used to get that a lot when I went all the way through college because I did 3 powerlifting meets when I was in high school. Then I went off to college and I trained. Like that was like that's what I lived my life for. I just love training. It
Hmm.
wasn't because I had some end goal. It's not because I expect anyone to ever pay me for this. It's training. And then I didn't compete in anything for those 4 years. And I kept getting stronger and stronger. And I kept hitting these bigger and bigger numbers. And people would like start to take notice because the numbers started to get decent. And they're like, doesn't count till you do it on platform. Motherfucker, where did I say that it counted?
Hmm.
Find it. Go through my Instagram. I got 1,100 posts, and I never said it was like an official lift. I never said fucking sub junior world rec. I never said it counted at all. I'm like, hey, today I picked up this much pounds, right?
Hmm.
It's like it's like I don't care. Now that I'm competing in strongman, it's cool because I can say, okay, well, I did do this in competition, right? I can
Hmm.
validate that I'm not just like a circus lifter on light plates in my garage, right? I'm not like I don't have a set of fake plates, and I've got competition results that I can start validating. That's cool. I mean, it's
Yeah.
awesome,
Hmm.
but it's not the reason I'm doing it.
Hmm. And like that's why when he said like, all right, power builders, when do you compete? The one thing I thought of immediately is like, well, first and foremost, why does my training always have to be in relation to that? Why does my training always need to be hyper specialized? Like the off season is one of the most productive like parts and like that as well. So it's kind of like what is the best way to get the most out of your off season and not even really think about off season, just enjoying your training, keeping your
Well, yeah,
um
exercise to me is just part of the human condition, right? Like
mhm,
human quality of life is lower without exercise, right? So if
mhm,
we have this premise that probably some kind of exercise doesn't have to be like you could do a combat sport, you could do endurance training, you could just do something, you could go play pickup basketball with your boys. But
mhm,
exercise probably is part of the human condition. It keeps your mental health good. It keeps your physical health good. To me, it's just part of being a human. And we
mhm,
all find different forms of exercise that maybe we enjoy more, right? Because it's like you don't want to be the guy who's like thinks that the only form of exercise exists is jogging, and he fucking hates jogging. So
yeah.
he's either gonna hate his life every morning, or he's gonna engage in no exercise, right? So it's like finding something you enjoy is awesome. It doesn't have to be for competing. We're just finding a form of exercise that fills that just human need, right? So like
Mhm.
I understand competitively minded people that are like, well, if I'm gonna do something, I want to prove that I'm better at it than people. I kind of I kind of get that. I'm not gonna
Right, yeah,
lie,
I
but
yeah.
it's like to say that that is like a crucial part of it for you, maybe, right? But for me or you, not necessarily, right? It's just like some people are less competitively minded than others. I take it Mike
Mhm.
is a more competitively minded guy. but that doesn't mean everybody is. You know, some people are
Exactly. Yeah.
perfectly stably internally motivated. I would say there's a lot of guys I coach, right? I don't pressure anybody into competing because I don't compete that often myself. A lot of them do because they're like,
Mm.
well, shit, I've gotten quite strong. I want to do something with it, right? Like, what's the
Yeah.
point?
Yeah.
You know, I've got you know, three other guys, including myself, that have deadlifted 800,
Hmm.
right? And like fucking all of them but me have done it in a competition because they're like, well, I can deadlift 800. I may as well go do it officially, right? I don't
Right. Right.
pressure
Make
people
it
to, but
official.
yeah, like I don't pressure people to, but you know, the kind of person that is passionate about it probably wants to eventually. They want to see where they stack
Exactly.
up.
Yeah.
They want to go do it for real, and that's great. But I don't pressure anyone to. And I've got tons of guys that I coach, and I've been coaching for years who have just been chipping away. Like some of them are very strong, and some of them I think have very like what most people would see as pedestrian numbers. We're all at different places. We're all just trying to be strong versions of ourselves, and that's why I like, you know, it's like this is what I do. I try to get strong. You try to
Hmm.
get strong. That's why I like you. That's why I like the other guys in my space on YouTube. It's just like we're doing the same thing. I have no reason to have animosity towards people that are doing the same thing as me. If anything, like you're the closest thing to someone that's the same as me, right? So it's like, if anything, that means I should probably like you. I don't like myself, you know.
Yeah.
But I've got plenty of guys who have been grinding it out for 5 years for good numbers or bad numbers, and they
Hmm.
just have no desire to compete. They're just like, no, I just finished this training cycle. I had a PR. Let's do it again. Let's put
Yeah.
in
Yeah. Hmm.
10 more weeks of work, and then let's go see if we can put 5 more pounds in the bar. And that's just what they're addicted to, is like that feel. I talked to one of my guys the other day. I was just like, hey man, I've been working with you for a while. What is your goal? I feel like that's important for me to know because I
Hmm.
feel like I know most of my athletes' goal, and I tailor the training accordingly. And he came to me and he said, I want to get better at squat, bench, deadlift, maybe some overhead press. And we've been chipping away. And I was like, I messaged him and said, hey man, what would you characterize your goal as? Like, do you want to compete? Like, do you want to be as strong as possible? And he's like, no, I just like the feeling of like that I'm leveling up. And it's like numerically,
Mm.
I feel as though I'm leveling up. It's objective, right? It's like it's a little tough when you're looking in a mirror and you lie to yourself, or you know, I look in the mirror and I think I'm tiny, right? And it's like I'm 265 pounds now. You
Mm.
know, like it's like I don't look great. I'm fat, but it's like tiny is not the word. But it's like I look in the mirror, I'm like, that is a small ass dude.
Hmm.
Jesus Christ. And so it's like it's hard because you don't have the objectivity to feel like you're leveling up, you know. Whereas numerically, you're like, it's a number. I did it. I did it. I did it. I did it. And it's like he's just like, I don't have any end goal. I have no end goal. I just like that feeling, you know. It's like like that feeling at the end of the block when I can just put 5 more pounds on the bar is a good
Hmm.
enough feeling that I'm very motivated to do 9 more weeks of it to do it again, you know. And it's like
Yep.
I just want to do that, over and over, you know.
Hmm.
And I was like, that's super There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, I think that's a lot healthier for some people because competing is so much more stressful that for some people it's inherently unsustainable. I think for some people competing makes it sustainable because they always want to have something that they're looking forward to.
Hmm.
Like some lifters I know always like, well, what am I training for? What am I training for? What am I prepping for? I know some strong men like that. I know some power lifters like that, where they always, even if it's 6 months away, they want to have a show in mind, right? Because it's like I need to be training for a reason, right? Whereas
Mm.
and that works really well for them, but that's not how it is for me. If anything, it just adds stress, right?
Yeah.
So it's like for a lot of people, it's like they have the motivation to train because they like training, and if anything, you're needlessly putting stress on their plate with this constant objective of competing again and again and again.
Hmm.
And, you know, some people it just encourages them to train harder, and that's good. But for other people, I think that's what burns them out is this idea that they have to compete if they're going to do it.
Yeah,
Um,
I can definitely relate to that because there was a couple moments in my training career where like my training goal was very much external and like it was dictated by other factors. So one of them was I had to lose close to 100 pounds in 6 months. Um, I made some pretty. I'll just say like fuck it. I tried to eat my way out the army like after my first year because I just fucking hated it. And then, but then like I got really, really, really fat, and I just
did you
looked at my
succeed?
I did, yeah. So I succeeded, and then I like went a couple more years into the military before getting out. Um, but when I was going through that, it was by far one of the most stressful times of my life, just because I couldn't enjoy the one thing that I enjoyed the most, my training,
Yeah.
and I didn't and I couldn't have the comfort of like food or anything like that. So I was in a pretty shitty situation. Like I was a like young ass kid alone, like couldn't enjoy my training, couldn't run into my comfort, like which was food, and I was just like, fuck, this is rough. And then like having, and then when it came to like other times where there was just external like goals, I just couldn't find the heart to kind of go through it, like one of my like favorite movies of all time, my favorite movie series of all times is Rocky, you know. And one thing that I think is like when it came down
What's the
to
what's the
was
best
that
Rocky? What's the best Rocky?
okay, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna go with Rocky 1. Like maybe that's a cliche answer, but I do
I
prefer.
was ready. That's the correct answer. That's the correct answer. No,
Perfect.
absolutely correct answer. I was ready to leave the call.
It's like the cursor was getting closer and closer. Like like I was like there's something good about each one of them. I love 3, I love 2. I can see why people like put 2 above 1, but for me 1 is like that's the true capture of it, you know?
Yeah, I love that it like I the biggest thing that I love about one is that it's a little bit unique for like a truly mainstream movie of it's
Mhm.
not he doesn't win.
Yep, he
You
doesn't
know, it's
win.
like that's that in my mind that's why it's better than two, right? Is
Mhm.
because it's highlighting how like emotional a moral victory can be, you
Mhm.
know? And it's like this is what a true underdog story looks a lot of the time and it's like appreciating well, no, you didn't win. You didn't like you weren't the guy who was a 1,000,000 to 1 underdog. You
Yep.
came and you knocked
Mhm.
him out. No, you survived. And that in itself is and it's like it's more realistic to what a
Yep.
lot of the time that looks like in sports. And it's just like it I understand that in a lot of ways two is the better movie, but
Mhm.
it because it follows a more traditional plot line,
Yep, that's
you
more
know, and it's already
acceptable.
operating within this world that's been created by the first one. So it's like, yeah, that you could argue it's a better movie, but it couldn't exist without the first one.
Mhm,
And
exactly.
the first one might not have probably wouldn't have been as popular as it was if it just followed more of just a feel good, you know, predictable underdog storyline, right?
Mhm.
I digress. I love Rocky One.
Yeah, yeah, same man. But like the thing is like with Rocky 2 and Rocky 3, like at least from my interpretation of it, when it came to him winning, like winning against Apollo Creed first and foremost, it wasn't so much that it was like I want to be world champion. It was more so like when he was talking to Adrian in the basement, like when like you know they were starting to struggle, he's like I this is who I am. I don't want to be anything else. Please support that. And then that's why he like trained it, and then when that was finally the when she finally supported him with that in mind, it's just like I am going to be everything that I possibly can be, and that manifested into world champion rather than I'm going to be world champion and then I get there. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's like
it's like a
so important.
cliche, but like process oriented rather than being goal oriented, right? And it's like I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where, you know, it's like wherever it brings you. I think the cool part is the process, right? And it's like that's
Mm-hmm.
why you know so many of my friends I don't think are like the strongest guys ever, right? Because it's not I don't respect someone because they're strong. I respect someone because they're following the same life path that I like. You know, I just
Mm-hmm.
when I was like introduced to this idea of like, oh yeah, you can just go do some brutally hard training with like some other guys that do some brutally hard training. We go eat a big meal afterward, try to rest up. Everybody's, oh, fuck, man, I'm fried. My back hurts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
knees hurt. We rest up. We do it again next week. And it's like almost like a brotherhood of like,
Yeah.
we all find some weird appeal in this process of like, man, I just want to be a fucking caveman. I want to be big and strong, baby. You know, it's like, I want to go do hard shit. I want to pick up heavy stuff. I want to go eat a big meal to recover afterward. I want to go to
Mm-hmm.
bed. And like, I feel like you know a sense of brotherhood with the other people that do that, right? And it's not because they're strong, it's because they subscribe to this same kind of like meathead mentality that I do, right? Like because it's like you said, it's the thing is the process, the thing isn't the outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? Wherever the outcome is, you know, if I know a guy, let's say I take one of these guys that I mentioned earlier who are smaller guys, maybe do have like left bell curve genetics, you know, if that guy shows up to deadlift day, you know, and he does his 80%, he's going hard, he's trying to figure out his form and he's eating his food, you know, and like maybe I'm deadlifting 700 that day and he's deadlifting 300 that day.
Mm-hmm.
I got that guy is no better or worse than me in my mind. You know, the way I view it, right, is it's the same reason in my mind that if you watch like World's Strongest Man, there's a very unique level of like brotherhood between those guys compared to other
Mm-hmm.
sports where people really they'll say what they want to say, but they want their competitors to do bad because they want to
Yeah.
win. They're
Yeah.
competitors, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, it's weird how much of a brotherhood there is in strongman. I think part of it is because you're a little bit of a misfit to be willing to like sacrifice a bunch of years off your life for a sport that doesn't pay well because you just want to lift heavy stuff, right? So it's like you're like these are the few people in the world that are kind of like me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you know how disgustingly hard it is, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
the years and years of back pains, the liver and kidney damage, you know, like the anxiety that they probably get from crazy amounts of PEDs, like it's hard. It's really hard. And I think, everybody else there is going through, this is my speculation, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the reason they're all nice guys is because if you're some negative like asshole and you're taking 3 grams of gear,
Hmm.
the mental, like you're not going to make it. You're going to get hurt. Like you need to be a kind of positive person and be ready to roll with the punches and bounce back. And so these guys who make it there that are kind of positive people that were able to overcome and manage these crazy doses of steroids, which I think factors in absolutely, right?
Hmm.
And you finally are with these other guys that are just like the only people in the world that are as like weirdly obsessed with this as you are. So I think that there's this brotherhood. I personally kind of feel that with everybody that I feel is putting in the work. It's not about how strong you are. It's just
Yeah,
the kind
yeah.
of guys
Hmm.
guys that I've trained with. Like, I really want to hammer home. Like I've got nothing but love for like natty lifters. I hate that part of YouTube where people are like fucking dumb Reuters. I'm like, oh, I'm not that dumb. Like
Yeah.
I like you. Why don't you like me? Or like the other side of things, like I'll see my peers be like, fucking dumb natty little women, and I'm like, no, no,
They'll never
bro,
get big.
they're smarter than us. They're not damaging their organs for
Mhm.
something that doesn't pay. Like, don't shit on them. Like, they're trying really hard. I respect, right? So it's like, it's not, it's like, there's plenty of women, right, that I feel live that lifestyle, right? Where it's like, I have brotherhood with them too, right? Where it's
Mhm.
just like, that's kind of why I like the fact that we have small YouTube channels, is the fact that it's not going to be a bunch of like more mainstream people who have a passing interest, right? If
Yep.
you found, we have the same size channel roughly. If you found our dinky little stuff, you're into it. You're really into it, right?
Yep.
You are very interested in getting stronger, right? And it's like you have this community of guys who are just like, that's the way I view it. Is like we're like those world's strongest man guys. Shit, right? But
Yep.
we're like them.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And that's why like it's very interesting that you bring all that up because like that kind of leads into the other argument of against power building that I don't like at all. And that is power building is distracting. And I mean, I get it. Like some people think like if you are like bullied into pursuing strength, even though your main goal is hypertrophy, like I get it, or if you somehow believe that yes, your 1 RM strength is going to suddenly make your pecs 10 times bigger. Like I can kind of understand where it's coming from, but if you are like if you truly have it within your heart that bigger, stronger, that's what you want, then that is how you should train. Power building is definitely that, and that's why I think the way I think about it too, because I like using martial arts analogies, not because I'm Asian, but because like I work in an MMA gym, and it's like different styles, like if you have a boxer going against a Muay Thai guy, a wrestler going against like a jiu-jitsu guy, there's no real like at least if they're good and at least if they're like have like true martial arts experience about them, there's no real animosity between them. And then they know that if there's going to be they have their own style too. Like when it comes to blending them, it's like okay, I mainly rely on boxing and wrestling personally. I don't really like kicking all that much. Like it's not really part of my repertoire. But I know other people, it's just like they like will just kick the absolute shit out of me, and then but that's fine. That's their style of training. It's not a distraction to say like, oh, because I focus primarily on this skill set or on this style of training. It's not a distraction. It's your
Yeah, just
style.
because someone
Yeah.
else approaches it a different way doesn't mean your way is invalid, right?
Yeah.
Whereas
Hmm.
like I feel like people in the lifting space are a little bit offended when someone takes a different approach or advocates for a different approach. It's like I only understand being offended if someone says, hey,
Hmm.
guy who has your goals, this is optimal, right? Okay,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
fuck you.
That's where
I
that's
don't
where
think
the
so. Right. But it's like, as long as they're not saying they're like, this is what I do, right? Cool. I don't care. Yeah, like
hmm.
I don't like it's like let alone feel animosity. I don't really care.
Hmm.
Maybe I feel like I could learn something from that person, and then I do care. But it's like cool. You go about this differently, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I definitely think that the whole like yeah. I don't know. That's something that's like I think is like probably not unique to us. This is like I lift. That's what I do. I like watch people lift. I like
Hmm.
different kinds of lifting, but this is the only space I occupy. I'm not seeing any other parts of YouTube, so I'm sure other people do the same thing outside our hobby. It's not like us as lifters have this problem. No, people have that problem,
Yeah,
being too
exactly.
nosy about what other people are doing, right? But
Right. Yeah. Because like that's what I've like really come to appreciate and love. Like as you mentioned, like if I'm not claiming my way is better than anyone else's, like that's why like when my one of my most recent videos, I just made it clear like power building is just the best way for me, you know. And I'm not going to go into someone else's channel and talk about someone else's method and be like, mine is
Oh,
better than yours, you know?
I do have something to mention though, right? So it's like I get the power building is distracting, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
I get what basement bodybuilding is saying, and I think he's correct, right? Where it's like when you are you're aiming to get bigger, you're going to get stronger. But let's
Mhm.
not get this confused. The strength is probably a byproduct of the growth
Mhm.
rather than maybe the sole driver of the growth, right? So it's
Yep.
like, yeah, if you're not getting stronger, that might be reason to believe that you're not gaining tissue, right? But chasing numbers on the bar isn't necessarily always the best way. I get that, right? A, that being said, if you can do a monster 8RM on the bench, you have big pecs.
Mhm.
Like, unless you're using some very out there technique to get it done, you do, right? Is that the most efficient way to get big pecs? No, but it is a way, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, that's kind of where I see it, where I'm just like, okay, no, my primary goals aren't physique. Like, yeah, I would just like to look kind of strong alongside being strong. So I'll go out of my way to like do a little bit of bicep work, all these things where it's like, uh, but that being said, I have a hard time imagining that if I eat, sleep, and train in a way that's going to get me to this fat set, the being big enough is going to be the byproduct, right? Because it's like a lot of us don't want to have the best physique humanly possible. We want to have a
Mhm.
good enough physique. I know you want to have a good enough. It's
Yep,
like,
good enough.
oh no, that bodybuilder looks better than me. Oh
Mhm.
no, right? Like I'm not gonna cry myself to sleep
Yeah, I
about
know,
that,
right?
right? Where it's like, so I'm not chasing the best physique possible. I'm chasing strength with a good enough physique.
Mhm.
And you can definitely get a good enough physique from this kind of strength chasing, maybe in a little, I wouldn't necessarily say 1RM is what you should be chasing, but if you can get a fat somewhere between 8 and or 6 and 15. So if
Mhm.
I could go into the gym right now, I could go do a big set of 15, I could go do a big set of 6.
Mhm.
And I don't think you could get to that level, right? Because of the overlap in what you need to be do to be big, and what the overlap in what you need to be do to be strong, where you aren't going to be big enough, right? So it's like that. I
Mhm.
think that is worth mentioning, right? That our goal isn't the best physique possible, whereas basement bodybuilding seems to be. What's the best physique I can achieve naturally? And that's awesome. It's just not
Mhm.
a lot of our goal on our side of our channels, right? It's just like,
Exactly. We
no,
have
I
different
want to
goals.
go good enough, strong as possible, good enough on the physique, right? So this idea of, oh, it's suboptimal. Yep, it is.
Yeah,
For
I'm never
sure.
gonna like I'm not gonna claim
Yeah,
that it's not, but like
yeah.
it's
But what I was going to mention that so I don't think it's distracting in that way, right?
Mhm.
Because you could say, oh, it's distracting if the goal is optimal physique, right? This
Yes.
is obscuring the goal. But because that isn't the goal, I don't think it's distracting. But what is the goal is if you say, I'm a power builder, I'm not a power lifter. Power lifter, you have this built-in specificity to what you're doing.
Mhm.
Where you're like, what am I supposed to be good at? Squat, bench, deadlift, right? And I think that big part of the reason that lifters are so much stronger now than they used to be, right, is yes, the growing gene pool. But I do think that, like you said, old school powerlifters did what we would call power building now, where their specificity was lower. I
Mhm.
think the specificity getting higher, aside from the gene pool, is one of the reasons the guys now are stronger, right?
Mhm.
Uh, but John Hack's training is very highly specific. It includes hypertrophy work, but the hypertrophy work is usually in the form
Geared
of squatting,
towards.
benching, and deadlifting.
Mhm.
And so it's like the specificity has risen, right? And it's like if we're lifting with techniques that aren't inherently beating the shit out of us, right? We don't need to be like, oh, low bar squats destroy your body. Don't do them outside of meet prep. You got to go get on the SSB. John probably doesn't get issues because he squats with a mid bar, or some guys
Mhm.
squat with low bar with no pain. Where it's like, if I'm not getting pain, I'm not getting beat up, why wouldn't I just keep doing low bars in the off season? And I think that idea that in the off season we could just keep cranking on the things that we're supposed to be good at, we're doing the things we're supposed to be good at, is part of the reason guys have gotten better, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's something that grounds powerlifting from distractions. Is it doesn't matter what you incline bench, it doesn't matter what you overhead press, you don't compete in those. Who cares?
Mhm.
The problem with power building is because we don't have defined parameters for strength, right? Which is fine. Like you could say, I don't give a fuck about bench press. I like
Mhm.
overhead press. I don't give a fuck about squats. I only do high bar front squats, or you could pick different things. You're like, I'm training for strength, but I'm not tied. I'm not married to
To
the
just
exact
3
squat, bench,
exercises.
deadlift.
Mhm.
Exact. You could pick different ones. You could swap them out for what you
Mhm.
feel passionate about, right? So it's like I can pull more sumo. I think conventional is cool, so I
Mhm.
pull conventional. If I was a powerlifter, I'd be an idiot, right? I like the SSB squat more than the back squat because I don't like having shoulder blades.
Mhm.
It's stupid. So it's like, that's awesome. You can almost make your own powerlifting. You're like, well, what
Yes,
lifts do I
exactly.
care about, right? Like I
Hmm.
can have a four lift total of close grip bench, high bar squat, conventional deadlift, and overhead press, right? And
Hmm.
I'm just trying to progress my goal is to progress the one arms and those. Awesome, that's cool. You have this kind of specificity that you've created for yourself. The
Hmm.
problem is that power building opens itself up to excessive goalpost moving, where
It
it's like
does.
as soon
Yes.
as you, and I that's the biggest issue I see with people who are really married to it, is they're changing what their targets are so often that
Hmm.
they just experience the newbie neural gains of each new motion, and
Yeah.
then they swap it, and they're not actually getting bigger, and they're not actually getting that much stronger because they have the freedom to constantly move the goalposts. And it's
Hmm.
like, yeah, you don't want to fit a square peg in a round hole. So it's like, if you keep hurting yourself on your high bar squat because you find low bar just works a lot better for you, I'm not saying to stick with it over and over and over and over and over, right? But limit the goalpost moving to make sure that you're actually moving forward, right? Because it's like,
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of guys who will do a different squat variation every training cycle, and they're like, yeah, I added 50 pounds from the beginning of this block, and then they do a different one the next one, right? And if you zoom out and you watch that guy for about 2 years, 2 years later, he's out the same level of strength, right? Because he's just
Yeah.
done a different fucking one. He's done a different one every time. And it's
Hmm.
like, there's nothing wrong with variation, but it's also hard to objectively, because like we talked about earlier, is if we don't set goals, we have a hard time assessing if something is working, right?
Exactly.
Where it's like, if I expect 5 pounds, if I did, like, I'm very advanced now. I've benched 560. My target is 5 pounds every training cycle, and a training cycle takes me about 12 weeks. I believe I can do that. And if I
Mm.
fall short of that, I fall short all the time. But that is my red light that I need to try to fidget with my approach. And if I
Hmm.
achieve it, I say, okay, I'm going to do the same thing again. And that's kind of this feedback loop, right? Where if I have a
Mm.
new
Mm.
motion, I expect to
Yeah.
do more than a
Hmm.
5 pound PR, right? Um, and if I don't have that feedback loop, I never know when things are working or broken, right? So that guy's like, high bar this block, low bar this block, front squat this block, specialty bar, specialty bar, specialty bar. He never has the feedback to tell him if his training is effective or not.
Yeah.
And I think that's the pitch. One of the, I'm sure I could think of a lot more. I just don't know many guys that I could think of off the top of my head that are like rigorously doing power building as I
Hmm.
would kind of generally define it, where they pick their own motions and they got these goals of big and strong. I don't know many people off the top of my head that I could think of, because most people who take things really seriously kind of do want to compete. But
Right.
I would
Yeah.
say that off the top of my head, that's one of the most common things that I see is this unique amount of goalpost, because it's like basement bodybuilding. I'm picking him because he is very much on the, like, if you listen to his channel, he's like, yeah, no, I care about growing. I care
Yep.
about
Hmm.
like
Bodybuilding. Just
developing my
straight body.
body, right?
Hmm.
Exactly, right? It's pure bodybuilding, and then you got like pure powerlifting on the other side. Let's say it's my brother Max, right? He's
Hmm.
pretty just total oriented, right? Where
Hmm.
it's like, you have built-in specificity from concrete goals. And it's weird to think about specificity for bodybuilding, but he absolutely has it. Anything that isn't optimally moving him towards that concrete goal of developing lean tissue and putting more lean tissue onto his body
Hmm.
is wrong. So we have some level of like specificity to the goal. And powerlifters have a very concrete specificity. It's just like, is it increasing your total? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Whereas like we don't have that, and it's
Hmm.
like, that's why you almost need to create it for yourself and actually stick to it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that this is actually a topic in like my next video. So like I'm already drafting it out, and so it's kind of cool that I get to talk to you about it, because like for me, like I'm like, so in this upcoming video I'm going to talk about like my personal fundamental principles for my style of power building. Like I wanted to make it very clear about that, because I think that's important. And for me it's like bench press variation, squat variation, deadlift variation, barbell row variation, overhead press, pull-ups, dips, and then curls. That for me, those are my 8 sacred exercises. Like, because that's like necessary for my goal. It's necessary for how I measure things across time. And I did conjugate for a year straight, and that was something that I definitely it resonated with me when you were talking about like the constant goalpost moving, because that's really what you do every single week. And I remember, like, even though conjugate is what got me above 500 pounds on the deadlift, I can't really say why or what exactly went right, like what variations and whatnot, because everything just moved. So when I was trying
Yeah.
to distill what worked, I was like, I don't know, maxing out frequently. So I was just like,
Yeah, that's why I like the traditional block structure of, like, let's
hmm,
just say we test every 10 weeks, right? And it's like, that is your yes or no.
Hmm.
Did it work or did it not work? And if it didn't work, you need to change it. If it worked, you probably don't want to mess with it. You probably want to do it again with your new 1 rep max. And it's like, uh, that's something that a couple of the coaches that I follow will talk about, is like building in assessments of rate of progression to your training, right? So it's like the Mike Tusher with RPS. What he does is he'll have like a single at 8, right?
Hmm.
And using the RIR, you enter the single plus the RIR into a rep max calculator, right? And it'll give you roughly an estimated max based on that single, based on the reps you feel you had in the tank. So if you get good at
Mm.
RPE, you can roughly gauge a max off of it. And it
Mm.
doesn't matter the accuracy of the max, but it's a tool to let you know whether you're moving in the right direction, right? Regardless of how perfectly calibrated that 1RM equation is, we should see month to month that estimated 1RM moving forward. Because it's hard to say, like, is like 300 pounds at RPE 6 or 315 at RPE 7, which one is better, right?
Hmm.
I guess it's probably about the same ish. Uh, but that would give you a better concrete like definition of, okay, well, are we moving forward, right? We could, and so he'll like assess it on a weekly basis, because the basis of emerging strategies is you do a given stimulus over and over and over until you stop adapting to it, you pivot, and then you apply the next kind of general stimulus. And so
Yep.
you need those weekly assessments to tell you whether it's working, and when it's not working, you pivot. Rather than saying like, oh, we're going to do hypertrophy for 4 weeks. Well, if you stop responding to the hypertrophy in 3, why keep going? Or if at 4 weeks you're still cranking along and just like you're getting
Hmm.
stronger and stronger and stronger, that has to be good for your 1RM. Why not keep going, right? So it's like, rather than pretending we know how to predict the body is going to respond, we see how it responds to the training and adapt the program from there. And that's kind of the basic principle, is like weekly assessments. We're assessing like constantly, right? Or like you could use AMRAPs to assess, right? Like you could either track PRs, and as long as we're hitting rep PRs and moving forward, we could estimate a 1RM. And there's the fatigue cost of that, and you could fudge your form and hit these inflated
Hmm.
rep PRs, and it almost encourages that, which is the issue with using AMRAPs as a progression assessment tool. I like it because it's fun,
Yeah.
uh,
Same.
but so it's like, or you could have check-ins. Like, let's say we have a triphasic structure of hypertrophy, strength, peak, right? We check in at the end of each phase. So let's just say, like, let's say I was writing a program for you, right? Last time we ran through this program, I like to hang out around RPE 6, 7, maybe 8 for a hypertrophy phase. We determined that 4 sets of 8 is a good loading scheme for your squat. Last block, we ended with 3 sets of 8 at 330 pounds at RPE 7.
Hmm.
At the end of the next time we run through the hypertrophy phase, we could have a check-in, right? Of, are we either at that same weight with a lower RPE, or are we at more weight with a similar RPE, right? So instead of checking in every single week with your hypertrophy set performance, we say, okay, we've got a 4-week hypertrophy block that we run at the beginning of every training cycle. The goal is to end it every time stronger than we did the last time. And if
Hmm.
we're not ending each phase stronger than we did it the last time, we probably need to fiddle with either, I would probably shoot you a text. I'd say, hey, man, what do your variables look like? And you're like, I'm not going to lie to you, Sam. I have not been eating right. I'd be like, okay,
Mm.
I'm not changing the program. Please eat right next time. Cool. Right. Or if you're like, no, man, I've been sleeping. I've been eating. I didn't get stronger. Like, okay, well, did you feel like you're recovering well? And you say, yeah, no, I felt great. Okay, we're not doing enough work. Or you're like, no, I feel like dog shit. Okay, we're doing too much work. Right. So it's like, we then, instead of assessing once every full training cycle, we
Hmm.
assess by the end of the phase, and we compare to last time we did that phase. Right.
Hmm.
But the most specific assessment we have is maxing.
Yep.
Probably shouldn't do that every week, maybe, because yeah, that's a great way to drive some really quick neural gains, but it's not really a sustainable way to continue getting better, right?
Yes. Hmm.
So we could say, like, that's kind of the centerpiece of a lot of my programming, is just like every 10 weeks, we max out ish.
Hmm.
Awesome. If you could hit a 5-pound PR and it's sub max, you're not going up. We're going to roll into the next training cycle, do it again, preserve that momentum, right? Because ideally, we're PRing with a little bit more in the tank. We leave it there and enter the next training cycle with some momentum, where you're like, you take the stress off yourself. You're like, I could probably coast through this training cycle and not get any stronger. I still get a 5-pound PR because I left a little in the tank last time. And it takes the stress off of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
For sure.
yeah, so you can have these check-ins on a week-to-week basis. You can have check-ins from phase-to-phase basis, and then you can have check-ins on a full training cycle basis, which is kind of the basis of my programming. And that's kind of where I struggle with conjugate, is like, what the fuck is a banded box squat at a check-in?
Yeah. I
You
know.
know,
And
it's
like,
like it's
I, the only thing that kind of like made me think that maybe there's something to this was like the infrequent amount of deadlifting was where I actually like kind of moved around like the recovery aspect of it. And that's when I kind of realized like, okay, maybe I respond better to actually like building in a bit more recovery into the program. But that was
it's
one of the few things that I kind of like could like objectively pick up on in that style of
I would
programming.
say it's somewhat common. Like you don't have great deadlifting leverages, right? I
Yeah,
think
no,
it's
definitely not.
yeah, it's I think it's more common for like guys like us with like the shorter limbs because any given set is a little bit more disproportionately fatiguing because of a less advantageous starting position, and the fact that the longer your torso is, the literally the longer the lever is, right? So it's like it's physically easier for a guy who's got long limbs to keep his back neutralish, right? Uh, I definitely find that lower volume, higher intensity routines often are a little bit more of a hit for guys with the shorter limbs. Like I've found that the guys who handle it well can lean into volume on the deadlift. If I lean into volume, if you lean into volume, you know, everything else goes like shit because your lower back is just fried, you know,
Mhm.
and you're not making these week to week progressions that you'd expect, you know. Whereas dialing back the frequency and maybe increasing the intensity a little bit, I see often work for people with like the worst leverages.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then the next thing is like uh when it comes to one thing I really liked was how like your check-in process and whatnot. And this kind of goes into like a little bit of like how just progressive overload is just so criminally misunderstood and misapplied sometimes. And one thing I tell some of my clients is just like next week just try to do the exact same workout and see if it got easier. Like don't add anything. Don't try to do another rep. Don't try to add more weight. Just see if like your like rate like RPE went down. And oftentimes they're just like that's an option, like I could do that.
Yeah,
They think that every single time they go into the gym it has to be a new PR. And
yeah. Well, it's like I get where they're coming from because it's like,
mhm,
especially I think a lot of guys can make it really far and still feel like repeating the same workout is a waste of time because
mhm,
it's like what got you your gains? Just coming in and trying to do more than last.
mhm, right.
Just doing that, it's overly simplistic, right? It's overly simplistic for sure, but you could drive some gnarly gains like that. Like that just gives you an accountability system for effort. You just come in one more rep than last time. So you're like, progressive overload is the key to gains because
Mhm,
that's what got you your gains, right? When it's like realistically, we get an adaptive response from doing a weight. You don't automatic like it's like yeah, if we repeat the same workout, we get a little bit less adaptation the second time and then a little bit less the third time. So like doing the same exact thing over and over and over and over, eventually the return from the workout becomes basically nothing and you're just going to maintain your capability of doing it.
mhm,
But just repeating it once, like yes, it's not going to maybe be as stimulative as the first time,
mhm.
but it's still plenty stimulative. It's like, yeah, it's not a long-term strategy, but in the short term, like you don't just do it once and your body's like,
I'm
400
ready.
is irrelevant now. You need 405 for me to do anything, right? And it's
Mhm,
also like, especially if we look at more like RPE based training, I like the analogy that training is more like a garden than it is a machine, right? Your
mhm,
human body, you know, it's like we can't force adaptation. We can't do it. It doesn't work that way, right? All we can do is treat it like a garden. We try to create an environment for the body that facilitates adaptation in the direction that we want, right? So it's like, what is the environment that facilitates adaptation in the direction we want, like you or me, right?
mhm,
A high protein diet that's consistent, a small caloric surplus, a diverse amount of micronutrients, so we don't have any major micronutrient deficiencies. We sleep a lot, right?
yeah.
And then hitting sets that are in the right threshold. So it's like the threshold of difficulty is realistically what's driving the progression, not the exact load on the bar, right? So it's like, is your body going to respond that differently from 400 to 405? Not really, right? So it's like a hypertrophy phase. Really, what we want to do is we want to create an environment to facilitate growth.
Mhm,
And I think, like, I'm just with some easy number selection from earlier. Uh, we don't need to be like robotically X plus this plus this plus this. Realistically, that's not how it works. You
mhm,
know, you can't just force your body to adapt. What you need to do is you need to go do those outside the gym variables. You need to go into the gym, and let's say you have a good work capacity. You need to do 5 sets of about 6 to 10 reps, and usually center those around RPE 7. If you're really weak one day, you shouldn't force more weight on the bar. if that's going to put you outside of that threshold. Because forcing more weight on the bar doesn't mean forcing more adaptation. It just means forcing a needless amount of fatigue. When really what we wanted to do, the goal of that workout was really to hit 5 sets at RPE 7. And that's going to be what drives you forward. So it's like, I think that the popularity of autoregulation is making it a little bit more clear for people. But it's like what we respond to is probably a combination of the rep range and the RIR, so the relative difficulty, more than it is absolute tonnage, right? So it's like there's a time and a place to force weight on the bar, especially because you and I are concerned with strength training, right? It's like if it's your last heavy lift before the meet, sometimes there's a number that you need to get it done. Sometimes. And so then it's like, yeah, making a lift happen on a given day is a skill, right? And more maybe when we start ending a training cycle, we're more in those peaking and strength phases, mastering that skill of I'm going to make it happen no matter what. Good. In a hypertrophy phase, we're trying to hang out and accumulate as much work inside these relative percentage rep intensity thresholds and put in the work so that we can go home and eat and sleep. It's not this mechanical input of if there is 5 more pounds of the bar, you gain 0.01 grams of muscle. No, it's not a math equation. We're trying to create an environment and a demand. And what is going to create that demand can vary on the day. I find that better lifters usually need less autoregulation, actually, because their variable control is better. Like they're more likely to, I went to bed on time. I'm an advanced lifter. I ate all my meals. I drank I'm not like, I don't get texts from my good lifters who are like, yo, Sam, I forgot to drink water today. My advanced guys don't do that to me, right?
Right,
So it's like they almost have they're more predictable in their strength because they prep. They're like 4 days ahead of time. They're like, oh shit, I got a big bench. I got to prepare well. And because they prepared well, it's kind of predictable where they're going to be at. Whereas I think people who don't have as good control, I don't even want to say advanced, maybe you have a job that makes it extremely difficult. Like I've got one guy who's
jobs and kids, like those
he's working as like an EMT, and I'm like, yeah, okay, fine. Go ahead and auto-regulate. So people have less precise control. Their variables are going to need to auto-regulate a greater amount because it's just like, yeah, maybe you could have got that 4 sets of 8 done, and it's going to be an RPE 10 with shit form. Was that really good training? Like, oh, I did the 5 more pounds, coach. That looked like dog shit. Why did you do that? It's like you're going to be buried for the next couple of days. You reinforced poor motor patterns. The goal of this workout wasn't to lift 400 pounds. The goal of this workout was to stimulate hypertrophy. Later in the block, the goal might be to lift 400 pounds, right? So it's like there's a time and a place for it. But I like that garden analogy a lot.
Oh yeah, definitely. That one just like I'm gonna have to like use that. I'm gonna have to steal that, like, because like that just like put it in like so much of a better way.
I stole it myself, so go ahead.
Wonderful. So the one thing that like we've kind of been hammering home a little bit, and one thing that just separates good from great are those outside the gym factors like sleep, nutrition, hydration, stress management to an extent. And I know that I was watching a video of yours like previously. I think you mentioned how sleep was actually one that you had a bit of trouble with, and like maybe even like meals too, right? Like when it comes to like those outside the gym factors and whatnot, like how much or how do you like coach them? How do you make those better? Like let's start with sleep first.
So I think sleep is a really tricky one because everybody is shitty about it and they won't fix it. It's really weird. Because it's like you'll have the guy and they'll stay up like an hour later than they should have, looking at a screen right beforehand too. And it's like, well, what were you doing? And they're like, I was just scrolling through Instagram. And I was like, that is bizarre because I know, and that if I asked you, you don't care about Instagram more than you care about your rate of progression in the gym. It means a lot to you. Why would you do that? And they're like, I don't know, because you're right. I do care way more about looking at some, like I was bored as shit. But it's a habit. It's a habit, and I don't have a way to break people out of the habit. It's something that they need to do themselves, right? Because it's like that's kind of where that's my personal approach to coaching. Is I will tell people what I suggest. I'm not going to try to trick them into doing it. I'm not going to use like psychology on them or like I know some coaches that do, and they're great coaches because of it. I think that they're actually very they're good at it. It's like it adds a lot of value to their lifters is this person nudging them in the right direction. I am very emotionally stupid. So I don't know how to do that. So I just tell people what I like. They come to me. As far as I'm concerned, they're asking me, "Hey, Sam, you're kind of strong. How would you go about doing this?" I tell them what I think. Okay, I'm like, okay, here's the basics of sleep hygiene. Uh, you need a consistent schedule. You need to avoid light. You need a cold, dark room. Here's a link to a relatively cheap AC unit. If you don't have that, you can literally bring it to your college. Like save up for it. It will be worth it in terms of just your day-to-day productivity from the better sleep. If you cannot black out the windows, try to get used to a sleep mask. If you need a CPAP, you need a CPAP. So you have all these like okay, you got these basics of sleep hygiene. You can find a couple other tricks. And if you are going to undersleep, then a consistent nap under I think 30 minutes is the point at which we start to enter REM. So if we come
Mm-hmm.
just shy of that, we don't enter REM, we don't disrupt that sleep cycle. So we got all these tricks. And I can tell someone if they ask me, like, hey, Sam, I'm struggling with my sleep. Whether they do them is up to them. I'm not going to pressure them to. I care as much as the lifter cares, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like if I've got a guy and he's like, he's that guy. He's that guy like who's even though he's weak, he lives the same life I do. He
Right.
like breathes, sleeps, eats this shit. Like it's what he does, right? And he's putting all the effort in the world in. I don't care that that guy benches 200 pounds. I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna give him every bit of info I've got because he cares. So I
Mm-hmm.
care. That is my brother in lifting, right? Whereas if I've got a guy, even if he's strong, who is just like doesn't care.
Mm.
Yeah, I didn't drink water. Like, well, what are you doing? He's like, nothing. I was lying on the couch all day. And he's just like, oh yeah, I didn't do a good job with that. Oh yeah, blah blah blah. I'm like, I'm not gonna lie. Even though they pay the same amount,
Mm-hmm.
I do start to care less.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel entirely unjustified in doing it. I'm more than
Mm-hmm.
happy, to try to perform well above my pay grade. I try to keep my price very affordable because I know there's a lot of guys who can't afford the average price of strength coaching nowadays. So I try to keep it lower, so it's like it's attainable for like me in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I'm more than happy to go above and beyond if they can. So it's like
Exactly.
I will give them all the tips I can for sleep. And it's always like an open dialogue of troubleshooting. Like, try this supplement. You got these good sleep habits. Yeah, maybe then we can start looking at like maybe you have magnesium before bed is one that frequently helps.
Mm.
GABA frequently helps with sleep latency. Uh, right. So we can go through these lists of things like, yeah, we got to get the big basics out of the way. I'm not going to be like, yeah, just take some magnesium
Mm.
and stare at your phone until 1 in the morning. Right. So, it's kind of the same approach I'll take for nutrition, right? I will nearly write someone a diet if I believe they're actually going to follow, right?
Mm.
I just be like, hey, when do you have breaks? Like, here, let's work on something that you can do. But if it's someone who's just like, write me a diet, and I know they're not going to fucking follow it, I'm not going to write. I'm not going to put a lot of effort in. To be perfectly honest,
Right. Yeah.
right? And it's like, but those who care, um, and I don't equate like strength with caring. I equate caring with caring. Uh, those who care, they can come to me and they're like, Sam, I have this issue with my schedule. What could I do? And I'm like, how about we buy some hard boiled eggs, right? That you can keep in your lunchbox, and on your 10-minute break, we just pop like 3 salted hard boiled eggs. Is that optimal, right? Like, would it have been better to get a proper meal in there? Yes, but you didn't have that option, right? So it's like we can try to tailor, like, again, we're all kind of walking the same path, but we're all doing different things. Maybe you got kids, maybe you got like blah blah blah. Uh, we're all just trying to do it the best we can. And
Mm.
if I've put myself in a position where I'm able to do it with a level of precision that I'd be ridiculous to expect other people to be like, never miss a meal, everything to the gram. Like, that's not realistic, right? Because other people have other priorities, which I am very happy that they do, because it's a weird life if this is what you do. Um,
It's a
so
fun
it's like,
life though.
yeah, yes. And so it's like, I think that's kind of how I approach it. Is like it'll be like a workshop with them of like,
Hmm.
here are my constraints, here are my dietary constraints. Uh, I'm more than happy to always share my opinion, right? And it's like I'm always happy to admit I am not a doctor, I'm not a physical therapist, but I'll make suggestions for exercises that could help with a common ache and pain, right?
Hmm.
There's a
Yeah.
point at which it's like if someone's got an acute injury, they need to see a medical professional. It's almost malpractice of me to try to solve it myself.
Yes.
But that being said, I've hurt myself many times, and sometimes I don't think it's necessarily necessary or worth it to go pay a bunch of money to fix what is a relatively easy issue. So I'll say, hey, just try doing this every day. And if that doesn't work, then yeah, go ahead.
Mm.
I'm not a nutritionist. I took plenty of nutrition courses in college. I like to believe that I am relatively up to date on the literature surrounding sports performance nutrition. But I would say I'm not a registered dietitian. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just telling you things that I think might help you, right? And it's like, if you have a health ailment, don't come to me. But I will give you what I guess just as your peer.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's like really responsible because like every now and then I get like new clients and they will actually tell me like some of the things that their old coach did, and I'm kind of surprised that these things are. I guess like I mean I get it like
I'm always so worried people say that shit about me though.
yeah,
Because
same
I'm like,
dude.
yeah, if you're this quick to like, I don't even know who you are. I don't know who your old coach is. If you're this quick to throw them under the bus, are you gonna shit on me too? Like,
Yeah, like when they
you
tell
know,
me that I was like,
because sometimes they're sometimes they're trash, right? Their own coach. I'm like, wow, that is ridiculous. But sometimes maybe there was a context. They're like, yeah, we only have you deadlift once every 2 weeks. And yeah, it's because you don't recover and you don't take your training seriously. And now I
mm,
understand why you're. So it's like, yeah, I think a lot of coaches will throw other coaches under the bus because it's marketing for themselves. They're just
mhm,
like, I see people on Instagram who are constantly like, bad coaches do this. And it's clear that the reason they're posting is to imply that, well, I am one of
I'm
the
the
good
good
coaches.
one. Yeah.
So it's like, that's why I don't really like those posts of like, bad coach. I don't know. I wasn't there. Maybe the client is just a dick. He's like,
Mhm.
oh,
And that's always that's possible.
I just asked my old coach for a different exercise. He told me to fuck off. Maybe a month in, I understand why. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't have the context. So I'm always like a little hesitant to engage in like the prior coach bashing, but I have had some people who it sounds egregious, right? And it's like, I'm always self-conscious. Like maybe he's gonna say that about me, right? It's like I aim for about a 24-hour response time. Do
Mm,
I wish that was faster? Yes, but because I keep my price lower, I need to have more clients. And I can't go faster than that. I'm busy from dusk to dawn,
mhm,
keeping up with the client load that I have, right? So it's like I couldn't go faster, but maybe someone's gonna be like, "Yeah, I just asked him what the set was for the day, and he wouldn't get back to me till a day later." I'm like, I'm doing my best, man. So it's like, I try not to externally judge, but they're definitely I've heard some that are like
mm.
inexcusable. That like I can't figure out a benefit of the doubt for some of this shit. Like I was coaching this girl who just like had the most stereotypical negative bikini competition experience of just like, yeah,
Mm,
my coach was like pressuring me to take PED. She's like, looks like she's barely started lifting. She's like, he was saying to like take Clen and Anavar, and
mm.
he was like, he was having me do 2 hours of cardio a day, and I did it like, and her like, she's been like received basically like, I hear some debate about like the terminology, but like metabolic damage, right? When you crash diet in a way that
Yeah,
is probably
yeah.
not proper, you have this lasting impact of a suppressed metabolic rate, probably. And she was very much in that. She was like, "Oh, I was able to eat a lot more before, but now if I eat like 1,200 calories, I start gaining weight rapidly." I'm like, "Fuck, man, I can't defend this, right? When you're trashing people's health, if it's one thing if you have a client come to you and they're like, "Yo, coach, I'm taking PEDs," and I'm like, "Can I talk you into a lower dose?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, okay, all right, man, let's
He's
go
like,
lift some heavy ass weight, right? And it's like, but it's like that's on you, right? Whereas like pressuring people into it, that's disgusting, right? It's like that's terrible.
yeah, man. Like, I'm sorry, I'm at such a loss for words, but this is like so enlightening. Like, like I'm enjoying this like so much, where it's just like I just want to listen more than anything else. That's what. So like, yeah. So one thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about then also is like, so the idea of noble natties and like, I want to kind of go back to the mindset a little bit. And one thing that I kind of see here is that like it's like the noble natties plus you plus Sam, and I think that's great because
Yeah, I'm out here sticking out like a sore
sort of
thumb. Like
like just like
I see the comments and I'm like, everybody's like dumb fucking word. And I was like, oh no, like wait, let me like I'm here too. Like
right, and then but for me it's just like I don't like, at least from like the people who I consider like within that realm of the YouTube fitness sphere and whatnot, I don't really think that they themselves are against like, I guess, enhanced lifters. It's more so like the ones who lie, the ones who like just have bad information for naturals and whatnot.
yeah.
And like
Well,
that
yeah, no,
and
it's
that
like
comes like from both sides, natural or or enhanced. Like you can be
yeah.
like you can have bad information and be either one. Um,
There's elitists on either side too, right? Where
mhm,
it's like, I don't know if I mentioned it before we turned on the camera or like after, right? But it's like, yeah, you got the guys who are like, every dumb Reuter doesn't know anything about training because they've never had to train as a natural. Well, first of all, little known fact, they used to be natural. You don't know how far that they pushed it before. So it's like maybe they do know what they're doing, right? So it's like
mhm,
to say that everybody on gear has no information pertinent to the natural lifter is a fallacy, right? And it's like
mhm,
also human physiology is human physiology, right? So it's like, yeah, probably there's going to be a change in some of the training variables, but the
mhm,
basics don't differ quite as much as people probably think they do, because the pendulum has swung back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it's annoying as fuck because you hear people say, "Yeah, no, low volume is the way for natural lifters, man. We just have to get stronger. The gear
mhm,
guys can recover from this volume that we can't, right?" Or you hear the opposite where you say, like, no, volume is needed for the natural lifter. We need more sets because we don't have a bunch of androgens in our system to drive progress. We need to do more than they do. They can get away with the low volume training because they're
mhm,
going to have this more robust adaptive response, right? And then you throw in the variable that I think a lot of people will overlook, which is on average, the much bigger guys on steroids are going to be lifting absolute greater loads. So it's
mhm,
like one set of 8 on hack squats with 7 plates aside with a full range of motion is different than 2 plates. I don't think they could do 5 sets. They would die, right?
mhm,
Whereas like the guy doing 2 plates could do 5 sets to a close proximity to failure, right? So there's an absolute loading difference that might account for that difference in training volume sometimes as well. But yeah, no, I think it's a bit of a fallacy to just write off anyone on gear because yeah, they were once like, there's plenty of guys who are only big because they're on gear for sure. But
yeah,
there's also plenty of people who the reason they got on gear is because this is their whole life. They spent their whole life learning about this. They're passionate about it. They're willing to sacrifice their health in the pursuit of muscular development. There's some very knowledgeable people who have just chosen to take that path, and to write them off as silly, right? On the other
mhm,
side of the coin, you have like douchebags and like untested powerlifting who are just like stupid fucking little natty boys. And I'm like, no, bro, you only bench 405 because you take an ass load of trend. You know
mhm,
very little about training. Like, don't shit on them, right? Like,
mhm,
they're doing the right thing, right? So it's like, that being said, I think that I only really see these opinions espoused by people in the comments who I suspect are very weak, um, who are just looking for anything they can grasp to for a sense of moral superiority. Either way, like whether it be each way, everybody just wants to feel better than people,
mhm,
and and maybe some people who are kind of like grifting, right? They're like adopting some like kind of inflammatory opinions because it's a cheap way to get clicks and to
mhm.
grow a following. And if you just say something with enough, Bromley just made a video about like responding to some guy who made a video just being like, if you don't train low volume, you don't know how to train.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like,
making
yeah,
claims like
that's like,
that. Yeah.
it's like that guy probably doesn't truly believe that. He's grifting, right? He's like
Mhm,
saying something inflammatory because if you can say something with enough confidence, people are very curious. Like, damn, how is this guy so confident? He must be right. And
mhm.
it's like I only see these really absolutist shitting on people. Like they're from morons. It's
Yeah.
not lost on me that the most of the people that watch you or me on either side of this are just like, hey, no, if the information is good, the information is good. There's bad and good information from both sides. Cool, right? And a lot of the authority figures. No one's been mean to me. You've been nice to me. Freaky D has been nice to me. Paris has been nice. No one's like, this fucking meathead is trying to occupy our space, and he's not a noble debt. No one's saying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like I don't get bent out of shape about it at all because it's just some goofballs in the comments kind
Mhm,
of grasping for like a sense of moral superiority that isn't shared by the people that are actually like influencing the direction of the space. Like Paris is quickly becoming the biggest one of us, right? Because he's
mhm.
so charismatic and he's like he'll make exercise popular, right? And it's like Paris doesn't shit on people,
No,
It's
no,
like
no. He brings them
yeah,
up.
it's
Yeah.
like
He's very
it's
great
from
at
like
doing
it's
that. Mhm,
yeah, it's from a place of positivity, right? So it's like yeah, I don't worry about it at all, really. Like it used to get to me a little bit when I was like younger and I first got on PEDs. I
mhm,
did it a little bit too early because I was still progressing quite well.
mhm,
I had it in my head. I'm like, well, okay, because I'm eventually going to be trying to attain a goal that couldn't be done naturally. Why wouldn't I? And like I
mhm,
knew what I was doing. I accumulated like a long ass training history beforehand.
mhm,
I could give you a big lecture about variable management. And I want to say roughly, and I think this is it's weird because everybody seems to have like it written down in a notebook. They're like, this is when I got on. I'm like, I don't have a date. I didn't mark it in my calendar.
Right.
Roughly, I think I got about 600 on the squat, about 420 on the bench, and 660, 675 on the deadlift, I want to say. And I was about 205, 210 pounds. And I think my technique could have been cleaned up a lot. There was lots of ways, and I was progressing just fine too, which is the worst part to me, right? Because it's like, in my opinion, this whole idea of like, well, if you're gonna need to eventually get on early, that's not really how it works. If you master the process, right? It's like if you look at the elite IPF lifters who got really good naturally and then hopped on, it wasn't as though their time was wasted. You know, if you look at Luke Richardson, he got to a 2,200 pound total natty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was a master of lifting weights. He had all the variables. And so then when he hopped on and switched to strongman,
Mm-hmm.
fucking repping a 930 deadlift in like a year. So he's
Yeah.
actually he's outperforming his counterparts who hopped on earlier, used the gear as a crutch, and never mastered the process, right? And so looking at my brother Max, right, it's like there's no way to prove Max is natty, and everybody's like, you can't deadlift 800 at conventional 19 and be natty, and it's like, I guess what we're gonna have to do is Max is gonna have to get crazy strong natty. People are gonna accuse him of being a fake natty, and then when he gets on down the line and he gets way stronger, suddenly people are gonna have to believe us. Where they're like,
Right.
Max, maybe let's say he's totaling like 1,000 kilograms, and people are like, there's no way that kid is natty, and then suddenly he gets stronger. Guess what? He was, right. So it's like, I guess that's what we got to do to prove it. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to you beforehand. It's annoying, and people are like, well, his brother is kind of open about it. That means he's on TV. Like, no,
Yeah.
that means we would fucking tell you is what it means,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I have no incentive to lie. I have no desire to lie. I think it's shit. You know, and I wish I had taken it further and achieved a higher level of mastery of process, and then got on, because you're gonna quickly catch up and surpass the guy who got on way earlier and used it as a crutch and didn't achieve a mastery of process.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have 6 years of organ abuse under your belt to get to that
Oh.
exact same strength. Your health is in better spec. And so it's like, looking back, it was a mistake, right? But I got reasonably strong. I don't think it was like extremely reckless.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, it was not the right move.
Mm-hmm.
And when I first got on, you know, it was embarrassing because I didn't feel I had juice guy numbers, right?
Right.
Because it's
Yeah.
like it's not unless you do something really reckless, it's not going to be instant. It's just going to look like you had a good training cycle. So I was like embarrassed about it, and I would see these comments. Oh, these guys hate me. These guys don't fucking know me. What the
Right.
fuck is
Yeah.
this? Why do I care? You know,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's easy to say, why do you care? Like, I'm sure you've gotten it, right? Where it's like, it's really easy to say, don't care about the opinion of a comment on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
It's just someone trying to get, it's probably someone trying to get under your skin.
Yeah.
If you get a set, they're winning. Who are they? You know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why does their opinion hold value to you? They're not your peer necessarily. Why does it's really easy to say that. I see people comment that they're like, yo, guy who's present on social media, why are you getting so upset? It doesn't make sense. It's like, even if you could acknowledge it doesn't make sense, you still have an emotional reaction. I'm sure you've had comments where
Yeah.
you're just like,
Definitely.
I would tell someone else, who gives a shit? Fuck that guy, right? But you're like, it annoys you all day. Why the
Yeah.
fuck
You
did he
like
think
you
that?
keep it keeps coming
Fuck,
back. Yeah.
this motherfucker's so stupid. Fuck, you know, it's like, I know it's dumb, and I tell my girlfriend, I'm like, man, I'm pissed off because of a YouTube comment, and she's like, you're an idiot. Like, I'm walking my dog. Fuck that guy.
Fucking
You
yeah.
know, it's like, I know, but it used to really get to me, right? Because I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, for some reason, people don't like me. I don't think I'm hurting anybody, right? It's like, yeah, it's not legal, but it's Schedule 3. Like, the chance that you get in trouble for is relatively low. And I'm not hurting anybody. I don't get it. I'm not lying about it. I don't get it, right? It's like, if someone a couple years ago, now it's fine. If somebody said, "Oh, I smoke weed," you criminal, you
You.
you morally abhorrent fuck. Like, what?
Yep. You
Yeah,
fucking baby killing,
it really used to
devil's
get to me.
lettuce loving.
Yeah, right. So it's like, it really used to get to me, and it's like, it's just been something I've had to navigate, because it's what my goals facilitate.
Hmm.
I like to be honest, right? And like, you don't want to ever glorify it and advocate for it, because no, you don't want to advocate for it. There's a bunch of beginners on YouTube. There's young kids who are influential, which
Right.
is why
Right.
you know,
Actionable.
I love the bodybuilders who are just like, look, man, I'm not going to tell you I'm natural. I'm not, duh, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what I'm doing, because some goofball is going to
Is gonna.
comment it or copy it, right? And it's like, that is in itself, like, you don't want to encourage it, because you shouldn't. You objectively, morally shouldn't. And people are like, well, look at this fucking guy, he's doing it, but he's telling other people not to. Yeah, I am.
Hmm.
Like, that's
It's
exactly what I'm doing.
it's like I mean,
Like if
There's a
if
reason why they bring
if
there's
a
a reason why they
smoker
bring
told me
crackheads into like classroom and be like, don't do crack, you'll look like this, and they're like falling apart. Like like,
yeah,
do you want to
exactly.
hear that from someone who never did it?
Exactly. It's a weird response where it's like if like a smoker tells you, "Hey man, don't smoke,"
Hmm.
right? You're not like, "Oh, this guy gets to enjoy it and I don't." No, no, that's not the point. That's not what
Hmm.
I'm saying, right? So it's like that was not what I was getting at, right? And it's like, I kind of get that. Like it's like if you are let's say you're an older brother, right? Maybe a younger brother, and you went through like an alcoholic party phase in college,
Hmm.
and you're on the other side of that. You're like, God, that was stupid. I
Hmm.
wish I had focused on my grades. And your little brother is going into college, and you go, "Hey, man, don't do that." A lot of the time, that kid is going to be like, "Fuck him. He got to do it, and he's going to tell me not to." Like, I
Yeah.
want to do it too. He got to enjoy it. And you're like, no, like, I understand that I got to enjoy it. But on the other side, I'm telling you now that, like, I
Mhm.
don't think you should.
Like,
Right.
I'm
But it's
paying
like you get this.
consequences you have no concept of. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, I get this. I get it.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'm an idiot. I've been an idiot my whole life. So it's like I'm sure if I was like 19, I'm like, motherfucker, I want to bench press 700 pounds, baby. And some guy was like, no, dude, like you probably. I was like, fuck you, like you did it. I'm gonna do it. Why do you get to be the only one that does it, right? So it's like
Mhm.
I understand that the knee-jerk response, but I really do understand like the natural community being like, no, you shouldn't glorify this stuff because I agree.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's why, like, for me, like, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone who, like, takes upon that moniker, that name of like noble natty. But for me personally, at least, when it comes to like, if there is such a thing as an enemy of a noble natty, it's not really something too external. Like for me, it's like your own doubt or your own shame. Like it's like if you feel ashamed of your natty status for whatever reason, it's like why? Like the amount of things that you can achieve are fucking astronomical if you actually take the time to listen to what someone like you has to say about training, programming, and outside factors. If you listen to someone like Paris, like someone like Landon from Basement Bodybuilding, Natural Hypertrophy, GVS, like if you take the time to actually listen and apply to them, what you can do and accomplish naturally is fucking great. And
Yeah.
then to have any kind of doubt around that is also something that I feel like we take issue with more than anything else. Whether that manifests in someone taking roids when they have no business doing so, or if they decide to like become like black pilled or like sometimes even overly academic. Sometimes I see this as being an issue. Like I don't really understand this line of reasoning, and quite honestly, like I never really know what to say except like, oh, that's cool. But I when in university, I've met a ton of people who are kinesiology majors trying to go into athletic training, trying to go into like certain like sport fields and whatnot, and they've
Tell them to
never
stop.
yeah, like they never lifted a weight in their life. And
That was most of my classmates. Yeah, because I was an
mhm,
exercise physiology major, and like I would say 90. I don't know. I say 90 because a lot of them were athletes, so they took their sport reasonably seriously.
mhm,
But there was like about half of my class that wasn't an athlete and
mhm.
also didn't really engage in any rigorous physical training, right? And it's like,
Yeah,
okay, maybe I get it if you want to get into physical therapy.
yeah, yeah.
Because like for some reason they helped you at one point when you hurt yourself, so you want to be like, yeah, that's one of the routes you can go to get into physical therapy school. You do an exercise ex phys kinesiology major. I know you can go the bio route at a lot of programs, but
Mhm,
you keep your GPA high, you get into post grad, you do PT. Okay, or like occupational therapy.
mhm,
I guess that was a lot of them was wanting to do like occupational therapy,
mhm.
which isn't really related to exercise. It just
Yeah,
happens to be the route there. But then there were some people who were like, yeah, no, I guess I want to be a trainer. I'm like, you don't train.
yeah.
I'm so confused.
Mhm.
But I guess I think it's like a lot of college majors where it's just like you're gonna get people who signed up for college because they were told it's what you do. If you're
Mm.
a successful person out of high school, the successful people go to college, and it's like without knowing for what, you don't really
Yeah.
know what the job like people will sign up to be a nursing major without knowing what doing that job looks like. People will sign up for being a XYZ major
That's a
without
good
ever
point.
having been around the field, which is really weird, right? It's like
Mhm,
you're going to commit thousands of dollars in 4 years to do a job that you're unfamiliar with, right? Where it's like
mhm,
there should be some exposure process in between there, and it's one
mhm.
of the great issues with the norm being to go into college, especially going into like a non-community college, because at least in a community college you can get your gen ed credits done while you try to figure out what you want to do. But going
Yeah.
straight into an expensive college without having any grasp of what you want to do, you just kind of well, exercise is cool, right? And you're like, well, shit, now I'm on this course. Now I've
Mm-hmm.
paid fucking 6 figures for this degree that only lets me train people, right? Like,
Yeah.
and then you realize you don't train like training people. Now you just have debt, right? So it's like, I get it. You can say they're stupid, and I get it because you're like, well, realistically, you have some agency. You should be thinking. You should like you have time to switch your major if you realize in time. Like
Mm-hmm.
you are an adult. You are 18. You're an adult. You could go enlist in the army, and if you can be trusted to make that decision, you can't say, oh, well, I was pressured into going to college,
Mm-hmm.
and like I didn't know if my major would pay.
Right. Or I
Google it,
felt like
right? So
trapped in
it's
my
like
major.
I understand like the whole like oh, they're fucking idiots. They should have gone to trade school. But I also get like, okay, well, my family pressured me to go to college. I would have preferred to start working, but my family pressured me to.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine, okay. And like I think that it could be your decision to appease your family. That doesn't make you like a beta, right? Like
Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Like.
I have respect for my parents who raised me. Like I might do what they wish, right? Because they put a roof over my head for 18 years. That's fine. That's a
Mm-hmm.
perfectly reasonable opinion. Um, and then you kind of end up being like, and maybe if they picked your major for you, that might be taking a little bit at some point because you are an adult. You have to take your own agency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I guess I've got sympathy for both sides of like well, you're an
Mm-hmm.
adult. Why did you make that stupid decision and incur a bunch of debt? Why would I forgive your debt to go get a stupid major that doesn't pay? Like awesome
Yeah.
history major. Why do I have to pay for it? Right. And I get that, but I also get being like some family pressure and like you just end up there and you get too far into your credits where you don't want to spend an extra year there. You're stuck with a
Mm-hmm.
major because you get like a sunk cost fallacy. But yeah, no, I know the exact same thing where you've got like a bunch of people who are in this program who don't have interest in what at its core it centers around, which is it's exercise
Mm-hmm.
science. You don't like exercise. What are
Yep.
you doing? What
Mm-hmm.
like I understand the post grad route, right? Like those people cool. Like I have some people who are like, I don't exercise. I want to help take care of people who have like missing limbs. You're a
Yep.
better person than I am. I'm an idiot. I like exercising. I'm here.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm here to learn how to get big muscles. You're
Right.
here to learn how to help people. Yeah, okay, I'll get out of your way, right? But it's like then there are other people who like have no post grad plans, and they're just like, yeah, no, I don't really exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Weird,
Yeah.
weird to
I just
me.
found it so weird. Yeah. And then, but yeah, because like because like there's some channels like in the space where they rely so heavily on the science, and part of their appeal, in my opinion, like this is maybe my maybe a controversial take. I think part of the appeal is that it complicates it, and then as a result, when people don't get their goals, they think, oh, it's an overcomplicated process, and I just don't understand it. Like it gives them
Interesting.
another out.
I've almost thought about it the other way.
Interesting.
Uh,
Okay.
I think that if you present this scientific argument, it's almost like it's like an appeal to authority, where you're just like, well,
Mm,
I can't argue with what the science says. It's the science. It's a
mm,
fact, right? This is the right way to train. When it's really no. If you actually read the breadth of the literature, you'd see it's a lot more obscure than what's being presented, right? So it's like I almost feel like it's an appeal to authority to give a concrete answer where there isn't one, right? Because it's like the
mm.
answer is try a range of a couple of things and see what you respond best to. But that doesn't sell because that requires the person to do something. So if you can find a pitch, whether that pitch is like you're a Mike Menser low volume bro, and one set to failure once a week is all you can recover from, which is such an asinine pitch. It's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
did you try doing two? Did you die? Like
Like
what?
what
Well, how
happened?
the
Did
fuck?
you?
I love some of the really not so great low volume cultist dudes because it's
Hmm.
such a funny process. It's basically it's always like they're doing like volume training and they're doing like basically just useless sets. They're doing junk volume where no one of their sets is hard. And they
Hmm.
come across this idea. They do like a Dorian Yates style routine or a Mike Menser style routine, and they do one all out set of to failure on like 3 exercises. And suddenly they're going from doing 0 stimulatory sets to 3.
Mm.
So they're like, oh my God, I'm gaining so much muscle. I like each week I see differences in my body. This is crazy. This is the truth. And at no point do they ever ask, well, could I do more than 3? Like,
Right. Yeah. It's just
and
like they
it's like,
stopped
and they're
it.
like, your body can't. I was like, did you try it? I tried it and I survived. This other guy tried it. He survived and he got better. Like, who is to say that 3 is this upper end most you can benefit from? You're going from 0 to 3 and like this works. Isn't the logical question like, well, can I take it further and
Yeah,
see
right.
better gains, right? So it's like a lot of the crazy results people see as a beginner from these these high intensity, low volume routines is just finally doing a hard set, you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think there's a time and place for lower volume training. Some people respond well to it, but like the people who are like, this is the end all be all are crazy.
Right, yeah,
Um,
because that
but
I
yeah,
try to
so it's
do.
like it's the same thing as that, right? Where it's like if you can give a definitive answer, it sells. And
Mm,
science, I think, gives you like this unquestionable definitive answer. Especially, I think a lot of the people, I don't know to what degree they actually aren't very scientific, and to what degree they're kind of like grifting, right? Which is just like,
mm.
well, if you read all like the majority of the meta analyses on this topic, you'd understand that this is kind of complicated, right? But I could just like I don't dislike the guy, but I don't like Jeff Nippard's old series, like science-based X workout.
Mm.
And then the video was just like EMG activity high on this exercise.
Yeah.
And EMG activity, I was taught by my very smart neuromuscular teacher, like it's a known fact that EMG activity does not directly extrapolate to hypertrophic response. It's just not a relationship that you can say is like causal, right?
Hmm.
Like you can flex the fuck out of your bicep isometrically against no load and get like some EMG activity going on. It doesn't mean that's at all stimulatory,
Yep.
right? Because we know that like range of motion, right, is going to be a big predictor, right? You could have a high EMG activity exercise with a very limited range of motion. Um, we suspect that training at a greater average muscle length is more stimulative of hypertrophy. We could do a small range of motion at a very short average muscle length, like just
Hmm.
doing the top of a curl,
Curl,
right?
yeah.
Reasonably high EMG activity, but with not being effective hypertrophy training. So it's just a false extrapolation. That's just like to say this is what the science says is objectively wrong, right? And
Hmm.
it's like I don't like those videos.
Yeah.
I like Jeff Nippard. I don't want to come. He's like made so many good videos and put out so much good information. I feel like an asshole. He seems like a nice guy saying like, oh, he's putting out shit information and grifting. No, I'm not saying that. I don't like those videos. And I think a lot of people would do that where they're like, okay, well, I found a study that kind of suggests this. That means I can now make a video claiming that this is a fact because science says so.
Mm.
When really science doesn't say anything; it suggests things, right? And,
Yeah,
and
this
uh,
is just.
we're supposed to look at the breadth of the literature on any given topic and come to a conclusion based on what the majority of literature is pointing to. And we don't even say it's a hypothesis; it's not a conclusion, right?
Hmm.
And like you could tell who's like actually quite scientifically minded versus who isn't based on how they talk about it. If they present something as a fact,
Hmm.
usually they're not very scientifically minded. And if they're say the data suggests, or we suspect, right?
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons I adore Mike Israel because that guy is very properly scientifically oriented.
Hmm.
If you hear anything he's saying, he's like, I believe it suggests we suppose it is
Hmm.
like the predominant theory, and it's like, and he mixes it with a good amount of practical training knowledge, where he's not going to just suggest something that like a study suggested that would be extremely impractical in practical application because clearly the authors of the study don't actually train. He's going to have a great middle ground of like
Mm.
plenty of knowledge in the gym, stays familiar with the breadth of the literature, right? So it's like that's scientific training done correctly,
Hmm.
right? And it's weird because you hear people like book science-based training. I know what I'm doing, right? And it's like, no, 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 no. You like a bunch of the people that say that, like Mike.
Hmm.
Mike is science-based. Like that is
Yep.
the epitome of science. That's evidence-based at its core. So it's like, no, what you hate isn't evidence-based training. If anything, you like it. You like the pinnacle of kind of. I would say Mike is kind of like a science educator, right? Because that's the title that Carl Sagan had. Whereas like after a
Mm.
while, you're not a scientist because you're not doing like breaking research. Your job is distilling scientific information and the scientific approach to the general population that isn't able to go read a study. That's your job. Is you're a science communicator. Neil deGrasse Tyson kind of fills the same job, even though he's a bit of a goober.
Yeah.
And to some degree, that's exactly like Mike is an educator and is a science communicator. He's like, okay, you guys don't have a degree in STEM. Maybe you don't have the ability to effectively read the methodology of a study. I'm going to distill kind of the gist of that's his job is to communicate what the evidence says, and he does it well. So if you like Mike, he kind of likes science, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I don't think that people actually hate evidence-based training as much as they do. They hate the people who misapply it.
Mm. Yeah,
It's like
100% agree.
yeah. So it's and there's some people who are really vocal, but like they're like, I'm on my high horse because I'm evidence-based, right? And it's like
It's
Are you like, you don't, are you really like,
hmm and it's so
uh,
weird, as if like they're diametrically opposed when like they very well need one another. Like it's not like you can just choose to be one or the other. They factor in like each other as well.
yeah. And, it's like, it's like anything else also is like, just by the nature of the majority of how studies are structured, they're giving you an average response, right? So
Hmm
it's like, if we're examining, let's just say we have a study examining a high volume versus a low volume routine,
hmm
and we have 30 college age participants. Usually, what they're going to do is they're going to standardize their training history so that isn't a confounding variable. And the only way to get 30 people with the exact same training history is 30 people with no training history.
mm
More studies now are just using intermediate lifters or beginner lifters or people who exercise regularly. But historically, lots of studies that want to control for exercise history have to go with none. That's the only way you
mm
can have two people with the exact same exercise history. Um, and that kind of throws a little wrench in the equation because we know things are a little different when you first start lifting weights than they are later. So it's not crazy to suspect that trends in what is effective for someone who's brand new to lifting weights might not be the same as someone who's been doing it for a long time.
hmm
So that's kind of a right off the bat critique that could be leveled. It's kind of like maybe it's a little bit of a fallacy of just like you could say that about every study, and it's like that doesn't mean human physiology is human physiology, right? Um, but let's say we do this study and we give 15 participants like the high volume, 15 the low, right? Like a really simple study design. We're not going to do like a swap of training styles partway through or anything like that. We're not doing that advanced of a study design. We just kind of see, we measure, let's say, muscle cross sectional area at the beginning. We like we measure it at the end.
hmm
It's very hard to define. Like, let's say we're training like with a proximity to failure, it's very difficult to define failure in this setting. Is it strict failure? Like you've talked
hmm
about this plenty of times, and that same problem arises in studies. Like it's kind of difficult to define failure. Like what amount of form breakdown counts as a no rep?
Yeah.
But us just say we do it, and it's a decent study, right? And it concludes that people responded better to the high volume study, right? Let's say let's say it's a really robust study and like maybe they're both groups are exposed to either amount of training. There's like a detraining period in between.
hmm
uh, if you and they conclude, okay, well the results are statistically significant enough that we can say this study supports the hypothesis that higher volume training is better for hypertrophy. The problem is then if you open up their results section and you look at their data, there might have been one or two lifters who actually got greater gains on the low volume training. So in the data sets of a lot of these programs, we can see of individual variability in the
hmm
response to training, right? So if you don't read the study, you might tell someone, no, man, you don't respond better to low volume. Science literally says high volume is better. And it's like, no, in that exact study you're citing, you doof, there's two people that responded better to
Wait.
low volume training. So there is still individual variability in response. So what does the science tell us? The science tells us probably what our most likely initial prescription is going to be, right? So it's like, yeah, if 90% of people responded way better to the high volume, if I don't know anything about someone, I'm going to start them on high volume. And that is an evidence-based practice. But to say that evidence-based is always high volume, I think is ignoring individual variability in response.
Yeah, and I think your camera just cut out.
I'm back.
Nice. All right, for sure. And that's why, like, me personally, right? I knew for a fact like I was just somewhat lacking in some of my like knowledge, and I just accepted that. But I didn't accept that as like, I'm gonna stay there, which is why I took classes to kind of figure that out. And like that's when I kind of like learned, like, first and foremost, like a lot of these channels, and I see this quite often, is that they never really took like a statistics class, like specifically for scientific like literature and like breaking down like numbers and whatnot in that way. So when they read it, they just like, look, this one had a like 1% thing, and they forget the fact that, was it statistically significant, and it wasn't. But it's just like,
Yeah,
hey, it's
yeah,
enough for a video, so I'm gonna put it forward.
yeah. And I'm not the first person to complain about this, but yeah, there's people who just read abstracts who aren't really good at distilling what a study actually means, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
inherently, if you have a study, this is on average, right? If you have a study that supports a hypothesis, there is an automatic, for the most part, 1 in 20 chance that it was just random happenstance that it supports,
Mm.
right? Because on average in science, we set our p-value to be 0.05, right? And the p-value is basically just meaning what is the chance this result was produced by random chance. And we say, okay, 1 in 20 is a low enough chance we feel comfortable starting to use this paper as research. But that means 1 in 20 papers, probably, because most things are just coming right within the p-value a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
1 in 20 papers are going to be a false flag, right? Which is exactly why we can't base stuff off of singular studies a lot of times. We need to see a study replicated for it to start becoming strong evidence. We need to see a meta-analysis of similar studies all kind of point in the same direction before we really start to like strongly believe it, right? It could be something like if you saw a study and it was just like, that the seated hamstring curl is probably better than the lying hamstring. You could be like, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to start experimenting with that in my training. That's fine. But off of a single study telling people this is a fact is probably not morally sound.
Right, because there's one issue that I don't know how common this is, and maybe it's not, but it's just something that I've observed, and that sometimes like some lifters they'll watch a video or they'll listen to someone and they'll reference a study, and then that study will for whatever reason become like something akin to like their Bible for the time being. But then what they do is that they apply it to themselves, but it's giving them less results than they bargained for, I guess, or less results than they thought they would get from it. But they're still loyal to it. They're still loyal to that study, and they're just like thinking, okay, I'm just not doing something right here. And then it isn't until a new study comes out that they're like, oh, okay, cool, I can actually leave that study behind and move on to something else. But my thing is, you had this whole data set on yourself that was like, this is why I always bring back like a form of self-study, like bringing things back to the lifter themselves. And you had this whole time where you were recognizing that it just wasn't working for you. And you don't need another study to prove that that it's not working for you.
But it's also tricky, right? Because what worked for you in the past doesn't necessarily work for you in the future, and
That's
what
true.
works for you now might not have worked in the past too, right? So it's like it's extra tricky, right? And that's why we need this constant reassessment. And I don't think it's always right to just check off this exercise doesn't work for me. What might 5 years from now, when you have like, let's say you are a very posterior chain dominant lifter, you bust your ass with good exercise selection for 5 years, and your quads have come up a ton. You might not be that same guy. Yeah, maybe good mornings weren't a great use of your training economy before because it was addressing a strength rather than a weakness. But now they help, right? So it's like I think that's the other middle ground. And again, this doesn't sell, right? It's like it's a lot of work. People don't like a lot of work, right? So it's like these aren't my current one, but I've got about a year of training right here, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I can look back at that for ideas, but it's not looking back on it as a fact, right? I could say, oh, when I tried this in the past, it didn't work. Or like I could say, like if I've got notebooks all the way back from like 6-7 years ago, right? And I could say, oh, well, 6-7 years ago, 2 working sets was not enough to be a productive training session. Okay, well, I'm lifting like twice as much weight now, so it might be. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like there's pivoting variables like that, which it makes it tricky, right? And that's why one of the best things you can do is to find peers, right? People whose opinions you respect. They don't have to be like niche internet micro celebrities. They could just be like some guy you follow his Instagram, he follows yours. You guys like each other's training logs, and you think he's a reasonably smart guy. Bouncing ideas off of your peers is one of the best things you can do to try to generate those ideas when you feel stuck, right? You're going to look around the internet for like a definite right answer. You're going to have a bunch of grifters telling you there's a definite right answer just to sell it to you. And then you're going to have a bunch of some more reasonable people, like the guys in our space. I think everybody in our space wants to just help people and put out good information. They're not necessarily just trying to do what sells, right? So I think, like, with that being said, you're going to get the answer from all of those guys. Try it and see what works. So you're like, well, fuck, what do I try? And then you get some ideas from the video. But the other thing you can do is have friends, right, that are serious about the training. It's hard to find people in real life, unless you go to like a powerlifting gym, that are as serious about your training as you are, right? Or serious about their training as you are. And that's where the internet is an awesome tool, right? The internet sucks in a lot of ways, right? I sound like a boomer, right? I'm only 24, so like, I guess I'm debatably a Zoomer, right? But I like, it's like everybody, all the millennials, the internet's so negative. Like, and it's like, no, it's just like, it is what it is, right? Like everybody who grew up with it, like us, it's like, yeah, no, like, of course you go comment on a public comment section on Instagram post, you're gonna get a bunch of like mouth breathers coming at you for no reason. Like,
Yeah,
it's just
yeah.
that's how it works. What did you expect, right? And so it's like that's not lost on me. But I think the internet's great in a lot of ways, right? You can connect with people who you wouldn't be able to connect with in real life, right? So it's like, are there a ton of people near me here in my 2,000 person town in Montana that take strength training seriously? Thankfully, yes, and he lives in my house and he's my brother. But aside from that, no.
Right. Yeah.
So and the internet opens up. Yeah, I'm gonna get my camera back.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, I should be back.
Yep, coming back online. Nice. Yeah, because like one thing with the internet is like, yeah, it brought the angry mob like closer to everyone, but it also brings a lot of like good people to you too, and like that's such an underrated thing. So I really like that point of yours.
Yeah, I know. It's like it just depends how you use it, right? So it's like it's like anything else, right? So I think that like people are like, the internet is rotting our minds. Just go touch grass, right? It's like I don't know. I know people who use social media, they're perfectly happy, right? It's like, okay, well, what's the difference? It's how they use it, right? So it's like, it's like if I have something on Instagram where this guy posts and upsets me all the time, I just unfollow him.
Oh yeah, it's
Crazy.
like
And it's like if
such
I
a
keep
concept.
seeing, if I don't follow him and I keep seeing it, um, I keeps popping up even on my phone. I'll block him. Whoa, right? And
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
but
like
it's like
cool.
I always think it's so funny. People go like, "Oh yeah, if you get some guys like trolling you in the comments and you delete it, you're letting him win." Right? No, I'm not. I
I'm winning.
that
Like,
I didn't like the comment, so I deleted it. And like he could be like, "Oh, he's so soft. He deletes comments." You're damn right I do. It's my page. I don't like the comments, so I press the little delete button. It's
hell
like
yeah.
if that makes me soft, I'm softer than baby food. It's like you can use it in a way that it isn't negative, right? It's like try to associate with people that like make you feel better rather than make you feel worse, right? Like have friends over the internet rather than have weird enemies that you watch their posts to hate.
Yeah.
And it's like you got tons of different options, right? And like, it's hard to respond to some of the negativity that comes with it. And like that's why it's not for everyone, right? And it's like for sure, but at the same time, it's like you've got plenty of different ways you can go about it. Like most of the people that think it's the worst are just like, man, I put up a political take on my story, and a bunch of people shit on me. I
Right.
hate social media. I'm deleting this app,
Uh-huh.
bro. Just don't post. What the fuck is wrong? Like,
It's the world that has the problem, not me.
yeah, it's just like just don't post political stuff on social media because it's not
Yeah.
productive, right? It's like you're not going to convince anyone. You're just
Mm-hmm.
going to circle jerk with people that agree with you, and you're going to get mad at people who disagree with you. And like no, the world isn't any better off for it.
Right.
What the
Yeah.
fuck were we doing here, right? Just don't do. That's not something it's good. What
It's
is
like
it
when
good?
we needed Ja Rule's opinion on the events of.
Yeah.
We know what day we're talking about.
So it's like, yeah, so it's like, it's like you could just use it however the fuck you want, right? And there's plenty of options to make it more of a positive thing. And I think that like that exactly, it's like what could we use the internet for is fun. Connecting with people across the world that you would have no other way of communicating.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like them, block them.
Yeah, like, cause like I remember talking with one of like one of the other peers in the space, and like even I had that problem because I was just like, as a freedom loving American, I was like, freedom of speech. I'm not gonna regulate anyone's like talking, and I was like, but there's like, but it's a private channel. I was like, huh.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's just like you just need to try to act reasonably, right? Where it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I've got a Discord that's tied to my YouTube channel, right? And there's like a
Mhm.
bunch of nice guys in there. There's some really strong guys in there who
Yeah,
like share their
like
lifts
there's
and they
some
encourage
dudes in
each
there
other.
like fucking like aesthetic as fuck too, and they like deadlifting like absurd numbers. I was like shit, because I was in it
Yeah,
for a while. I don't like.
yeah. And so it's like, Discord as a service attracts some idiots, right? And
Yeah.
it's like it's kind of known for it's kind of the reputation it has. That's not lost on me. I don't know that much about Discord, but I know that I have one. and I try to keep it relatively positive. I just randomly selected some of the guys in there. I'm like, you're a mod. Please make this place not a shithole, right? And it's like, just be reason. It's all it is. Just be reasonable. People are
Reasonable,
like,
yeah.
they're like, all these other, Discord servers are politically correct shitholes. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry that you had a negative experience. But
Mm.
then they're just like throwing around homophobic slurs all over the place. I'm like,
Mhm.
this is what they stopped you from doing that you're so upset about, man. This is tied to my business, you goober. Like,
Yeah.
it's the name of this is the same name of my LLC. Why do you like? No, I'm not the word police, but stop
Mhm.
doing that. Just act like a reasonable human
Like human
being. What the
beings.
hell?
I know it's that's the like that's just the thing with like any like discussion based like community, like it always like kind of goes through those cycles, but at the same time like I'm kind of glad that they still exist and that they're there because like you meet really nice people, so
Yeah, no, it's
like it's
cool. Like
awesome.
there's some guys in like from Poland in there. I
Yeah.
was like, what do you boys eat? What the fuck do you eat in Poland? Right? It's cool, right? Like I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, I've got all these dumb American questions where I'm just like, are people short there? Like I have no idea anything that goes on outside of America, like the typical stereotype, right? So it's
Mhm.
cool. I can just be like, yo, European boys, what are your go-to snacks? You
Mhm.
know? And they'll have a bunch of weird shit that I've never heard of. I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, and like I'm super proud of not knowing what a kilometer is and like asking people like, all right, what is that in washing machines and hot dogs? Like,
Yes, I'm always I like everybody's like, the majority of this Discord uses kilograms, right? I'm only giving you in pounds. Look up the conversion, baby.
that's your job. Yeah, so I freaking love. I mean, I love like the internet. And I was afraid, like quite honestly, when I first started my channel, I did have that overwhelming fear. But I'm really glad that the result has been overwhelmingly positive. Like I
See,
feel
I got the opposite.
really.
To me, the internet isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not some like edgy boomer thing. Oh, I live in the
It's
real
not
world.
real.
I barely live in the real world. I don't leave my house.
Mm-hmm.
I spend more time on the internet than I do in the real world. So I guess that's not my point. But my point is that for some reason it doesn't seem like genuine human interaction, right? Because like I am a hermit.
Mm-hmm.
I leave my house once a week to go to the grocery store because I train and I work at home.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the day, nobody is home. My girlfriend and my brother leave at like 6 and 8 in the morning, respectively, and
Mm-hmm.
don't get home until 8:30 at night. Right. So it's just me and my dog
Mm-hmm.
all day. And so it's like I like that. I've always been like a really weirdly antisocial dude. In college, I had like no friends. I just wore my headphones everywhere. I
Yep.
ate in the dining hall by myself every day. It's just like, and I wasn't sad about it at all. I wasn't like melancholy, like angsty. I was just like, I was living a great life.
It's
I
so
had like
peaceful.
I had the dining hall I could just hit for my 5 meals. I didn't have to cook. I went, I pumped some iron, I read some books. It's fucking awesome, right? And it's just kind of
Mm-hmm.
always been my disposition is just kind of like not being a very social person and kind of going out of my way to avoid it, right? And it's like, but on the internet, I don't mind. Like, and it's like you'd think that would equate to um, being averse to like public speaking, right? And it's like, no, I've always been decent at public speaking because it doesn't feel like actual person-on-person interaction. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just talking at a crowd, right? So every time I've ever done presentations, it's gone well. And the internet very much feels the same way to me. Whether I'm typing up a comment to like explain something, whether I'm making a video, or even like these like Skype calls that I've done, it doesn't feel like a social interaction. It feels like me just rambling about lifting, which I'm very comfortable
Mm-hmm.
doing.
And I
And it's like
enjoy
that's
it
and
incredibly.
well, it's never felt real, right? And that's why like I just been cranking away making videos. No one watches them. I don't care. It's not real.
Mhm.
I'm not a
Right.
failure. So I was like 200 videos deep in my YouTube, and I had like 50 subs, and I was like, I'm not trying to be famous. This isn't real. Like
Mhm.
I'm just making videos saying what I think about lifting. So it's like that's always been cool. It's like I don't think I've ever been anxious. I've been annoyed playing. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not just gonna pretend like there's been comments that I'm just like. Usually, I get upset that someone can be that dumb. You know,
Yeah.
because it's like I think I can talk myself in at least a reasonable enough way that I don't think I'm like seeing criticism that hits a little bit too close to home very often, right? Because that's like always the thing that hurts the most. Something you kind of know is true, right?
Mhm.
And I'm kind of restrictive with what I put on the internet. I don't think I put anything out there that I'm insecure about, right? So it's like
Mhm.
there isn't anything that's going to hit too so close to home. So usually when I get mad, it's just someone like says something and it's so mind-numbingly dumb
Hmm.
that I just like walk all around pissed off. I'm like, how the fuck can someone, a real breathing human being, think this? What the hell? Or like, and like it'd be even worse if I'm just like, oh, you are misunderstanding something. Let me explain, right?
Hmm.
Like I'm not saying that. I'm saying this, and I respond with like an eloquent comment, and
Hmm.
then they'll double down with the stupidest shit, and like I'm just like, holy fuck,
Yeah.
I can't do this anymore, you know.
Hmm.
But like aside from just comments that like bug me like that, right? It's never felt real enough to stress about it, right? Like that's what
Hmm.
I barely edit my videos. I don't like basically everything I've ever filmed, I've posted. I've never watched something. This isn't good enough to post.
Hmm.
My channel sucks. Like of course it's good enough to post. There is no minimum. The audio is completely broken on like 50% of my videos. Like there is no minimum standard, you know. So I never stress about it, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah, and like that's something that after doing it for a little bit, like it took some time to kind of develop that I wouldn't want to say apathy, but more so that confidence or that comfort with it as well, like to
See,
get to that point.
I got no confidence with it at all because I know it's not good. You know,
Mhm.
everybody's like, edit your videos. No,
No.
I don't want to. I don't know how. They're
Hmm.
like, get a nice camera. Are you gonna
Yeah.
pay for it? I don't want to pay for it. You know?
Yeah. Because like for me, the only reason why I like for the reason why I edit my videos, it actually isn't for my viewers. It's for me. It's because like if I'm going to like put time and effort into it, I kind of want to get something out of it as well.
Yeah. No,
And like,
that makes perfect sense, right? If you're gonna do something, you may as well do it well. You know.
mm,
I guess it's to me, it's not even like. I guess that's the difference, right? Is you're anxious about it because you're putting out something that you want to be like proud of, right?
yeah, I would say so.
Like
Yeah.
it's like I don't, like a product implies it's for money, right? It's like
Mhm.
obviously none of us are making this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so it's like it's not a product in that way, but it's like kind of showcasing something you made, right?
Mhm.
Whereas to me, my videos aren't something I made. It's just me sharing my thoughts. Like
Mm.
the video isn't the thing I made, right? It's just me trying to convey some words, right? So it's like I guess that's the way I always at least thought about it to myself. Like, well, if I could find a video of a guy who maybe could share some good insight with how to get stronger to me, I wouldn't particularly care about the resolution of the video. I don't think
Yeah.
I would care about the editing of the video, and I wouldn't care about the sound quality as long as I can discern his words.
Yeah.
I would care about, well, I really want that information, right? And like I guess just because I've been trying to reach out to like-minded people, I just assumed everybody was like me, and they'd be like, well, I don't really care. It could be super low res. I've realized that that is not the case, and people are very picky and annoying, and
Mm.
they constantly harass me about my terrible audio and video. So I bought a GoPro, and I got slightly less complaints once I got the GoPro. It's like a super old GoPro too, so it's not good either. But
Mm.
ever since I got that, I think I hit this minimum threshold for people to not be extremely upset with the quality. So and because it's just me trying to like put my ideas out there rather than like making something I want, like a piece of work, you know.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think about it that way.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
respect
wish
that.
I did.
I
No. It's just wrong. It's like
wrong.
you can make the video. You can make the video and then just make it nice. There's
Mhm.
no reason not to. Like you said, I agree with you. It's like if you're gonna do something, you may as well do it right. For some reason, that doesn't register with me because it's like that's how I am with most other things. You know, it's like if I was going to write a program, I'm not going to put it out unless I think it's a good program. Because if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing a little bit. I'm not gonna make a
Mm.
book. Like I'm not gonna like it could be something really arbitrary. You know, I'm not gonna do a drawing and put it on the wall unless I think it's good. If it's not good, I'm not putting it on the wall. That's pretty like if I'm not willing to put something up on my own wall in my house, the fact that I'm willing to put it up on the internet is a little bit silly, and that's not lost on me. You know what I mean? But you know, I would if I could choose, I would take that mentality that you have because it's just like
Mm.
that is the more honorable way to go about life. It's just like if it's worth doing, do it well, and that's where your confidence can span from. You know?
Mhm. Yeah, I appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. Yeah, but I also because like your information, for example, like I I can go 5 minutes in and just like have like just latch onto something and just like think about it for the rest of the day and like try to try to branch out as many things and trying to and like gives me some like a bit of like some things that I want to try out in the future when they make sense or whatnot
Well,
or
I'm glad. That's kind of all I want to get done. Right? Is like
mm,
I imagine putting out my videos and having like intermediate lifters like watch them or even advanced guys, right? Because my brother doesn't watch my fucking videos, and he's like, I feel like they're for like intermediate guys. I'm advanced, and I'm like, no. My goal is to throw out a lot of different angles to look at different training variables and different like just throw out a lot of things, right? And the idea is that maybe I'll present something in a different phrasing or a different light or a different perspective that'll make you think about your own training and evaluate, right? Because I find myself watching some guys who are making videos that I wouldn't say is for advanced lifters. I don't think like you need to be an advanced lifter to get this, you know.
Hmm.
It's not that deep, right? But I'll still watch it because I might hear like a phrasing difference that like really pivots how I think about something, right? It could just
Hmm.
be like, oh, here's why RPE doesn't violate the idea of progressive overload, right? That's a Mike T video. That's not a complicated concept. Just understanding what RPE is and how
Hmm.
training works is going to let you understand that. But I still will watch that video even though I know the answer, right? Because there's a bunch of different like little phrasings that someone might say, right? And that's kind of always what I thought with my videos is like, if I can put out there a bunch of different angles, people who know what they're doing or following the same path as I do, like will like think like, oh, I didn't think of that phrasing, because that's where I find the most value in videos nowadays. Because
Hmm.
nobody really makes videos for me, right? I've been doing this for a decade. I have a college degree in it. I'm a professional coach, right?
Hmm.
That is such a small target demographic. No one
Right.
would ever make videos for me, right? And it's just like
Hmm.
that's not
Definitely.
there's not no one, right?
There's
So
no
it's
market.
like,
Yeah.
well, how can I learn? I can hone in on the perspective shared on more intermediate centric uh,
Mm.
information, and then use what I know as an advanced lifter to like you said, you start branching things off of that using all of the things you already know as someone who's been doing it a long time. And that's kind of always been like my cool, like I want to make videos that like I don't want to be someone who's like, here's a training routine for you, guy who just stepped into the gym. I would love if my videos help those people and inspire those people,
Hmm.
you know. But in my head, I want my videos to be like, well, no, I'm not the most popular guy, but the guys who are already pretty good, I'm their favorite channel. I'm not saying that's what I am at all, but
Mm.
that's kind of always what I thought was
The
like the
intention, the
ideal,
goal.
right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's like people, Josh Bryant says that about some of his lifters, right? Where it's like, you have the most popular lifter in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who I don't know who it might be. Uh, like, and it, like, so like the most people who are casually interested in strength sports, they love this guy.
Mm.
And then you have your favorite lifter,
Mm.
right? And you know, that's something that's always been very important to me, right? Is the respect of my peers is means everything to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, I'll define peers not as strength, right? I think that's always goofy, right? Because it's like someone could be a great lifter at 165 pounds and just like live this shit.
Mm-hmm.
They're my peer. They might be my superior, right? Just because I wanted to chase absolute strength. That's a small difference at the end of the day. And I decided to go the not natty route, right? Like the numbers don't dictate that, but like process dictates it. Someone's great at lifting weights.
Mm-hmm.
If they watch my video and they're like, oh yeah, that guy's got my favorite channel. If there's one of those guys, that makes me very happy, right?
Mm.
Whereas I guess, you know, people who are really new and might burn out on it any week now. No disrespect to them at all, but that means less to me, right? So it's like I've always
Yeah.
wanted to appeal to those, you know, intermediate, more advanced guys. I would love, I would, if I could pick, I would much rather my videos do help those beginners and inspire those beginners to be the intermediate guys. But what matters to me is if I'm like the intermediate, the advanced guy's favorite guy, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that would be my goal.
Yeah. Because like I'm gonna open up a little bit, but like there's one issue I have with making some beginner centric like videos. Like so like I'll make a video where it's just like a like one of my most popular videos is a novice focused power building program. And when you go specifically for that novice beginner demographic, I sometimes get questions where it's just like, can you do this program for this, and this? And then they're asking like questions that are just like, in my mind, like so far off and almost irrelevant. But at the
Well,
same
I
time,
also
I'm
you also get all the guys who are just like basically asking you this giant string of questions where it's like, my brother, you are asking me to write a full program
Mhm.
individualized to you. That's my job.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to be a dick and hide things behind a paywall, but
Hmm.
you are asking me to write you a program.
Hmm. Exactly.
No, no. I will give you all the tools to write your own. Stop being lazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
And like those are honestly the questions. Like, dude, like there's only been a couple times where like someone actually has a issue that I'm like above 20% body fat, but the ones that really piss me off are just the ones where I'm just like, I take the time to actually like read their question, give them an answer that is like sufficient in my opinion, and then they're just like, and then they ask a question and like it can be phrased in any what way, but the premise of it is, can you just do that for me? And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no, you have to do it yourself. Like I gave you like a whole series of videos, this video, this comment, answering yours, and I'm just like those are the
Yeah,
those are the comments that get me way more than
I've
anything else.
already gone up and above and beyond for sharing as much info as I can for free. You're
Mhm.
just like, do more for me. No,
Right.
fuck you. Get the fuck
Yeah.
out of here.
Yeah. Right. So I'm also glad that they're like, because of the size of the channel and the style of the channel, I think that there is all going to be that that 1 in 10 that are like who they just take it and they go. And
Yeah.
every now and then I get that comment where it's just like, hey, I started with this program, I did it for 6-12 months, and I'm like, this is where I'm at now. I was like, oh shit, like that's
Yeah,
wonderful,
that's
like
always that's like, okay, that's exactly what I had. Like that was my best case scenario, right? It's
yes,
like,
yeah, and it's so
oh,
rewarding.
your videos helped me get way stronger. And I'm like, wow, it actually worked. I did not expect that. Like I'm trying,
Yeah,
but I didn't expect it to work.
right,
But
yeah.
it's like it's one of those things which I think that's a skill that, like, if you look right to get really big, usually you need to tailor your information more to beginners because of what we talked about earlier, which is just that there's more beginners than are intermediates, and there's
Mhm,
more intermediates than are advanced, right? So to grow a very, very large channel,
mhm,
your information needs to skew on the beginner end, which you'll lose the interest of maybe your peers, um,
mhm,
right? So it's like if you look at the really big channels, right, they do skew towards like, here is how to squat.
mhm,
They don't say you already have a good squat. Here's how to fiddle with your form to address these minor issues,
mhm.
even though you're already squatting 500 pounds, right? They don't
Right.
say that. That's not going to get clicks. So it's like you get like Alan Thrall and you get Omar, and you get videos that are generally not high level information, and that's not wrong. They're
Yeah.
helping more people than I am. They get people more into lifting, right? Those like grassroots level stuff is good. But I've always thought it was the holy grail to the rare person who knows how to make that higher level information. Maybe it's not truly high level information, but they know how to weave in stuff like we talked about earlier that gets high level lifters thinking. So high
Mhm,
level lifters will want to watch your videos still, even though it's not maybe like it's not a master class in like whatever it is. It's
mhm,
stuff you already know. But just because you already know something doesn't mean consuming information around it is useless.
mhm,
That's something that I really I think a lot of my knowledge has come from is never feeling like I'm past that.
mhm,
And I think off the top of my head, Dr. Mike has done a pretty good job of that, to where he'll prevent like good, medium, upper level information and include different phrasings and enough practical little pro tips that a good lifter will still feel inclined to watch his video. But it's so helpful to the lower level lifter that he still has a massive audience.
mhm,
I think that Chad Wesley Smith with Juggernaut Training Systems is the greatest strength training YouTube channel ever made.
mhm.
Their old videos on the scientific principles of strength training is the best thing I've ever seen that's not behind a paywall or behind a paywall. It is amazing. It's the editing is great. The information is great. Uh, Chad is extremely articulate. Max is extremely articulate. Back when Mike Israel worked with them, he did a lot of their stuff.
Yeah.
It's the greatest. It's the greatest thing out there, and their subscriber count reflects that. So it's like, yeah, no, they're not pandering to beginners, and they've got like hundreds of thousands of subs because it's just that good. I
Mhm.
can't do that by myself. I'm not gonna lie, right?
Yeah, and one thing
But
I
like,
appreciate about those
but the one,
channels too. Oh, go
but
ahead.
I was gonna say the other one that jumps out at me is may rest in peace, John Meadows,
Mm,
right? Made very beginner friendly videos, so he got very big, and they were videos that you could conceivably make by yourself. They weren't these like crazy production value, like you've written some books and you're giving off the ideas of the books, like the Juggernaut ones.
mm,
They were just him talking, giving some tips from his many years as a great bodybuilding coach and a bodybuilder. Uh, and I always thought that those are truly the gold standard of doing YouTube the best way possible, to where you have this mainstream appeal to where you could be a huge channel and you could reach more people. But I watch John's videos. I
mhm,
want to know. I'm curious. What are John's top 3 protein sources? You know what I mean? It's like
mhm.
I see that and I'm like, I'm the same as that beginner. It's like, I wonder what they are. It's probably beef, chicken, and salmon or eggs, right? Like I don't
Yeah.
know that, but I want to know what he has to say, right? So it was like
Yeah.
that to me was like just the pinnacle, right? Of
Hmm.
just like the respect of your peers, the mainstream appeal, right? And like I'll watch videos for ideas of like what does it look like to do this perfectly, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
I think Paris has done a pretty good job of that, kind of
Hmm.
emulating that in the strength field of like how can I include some decent level training concepts in videos that are a little bit like making it geared towards the lower level intermediate, but
Hmm.
including some decently complex training principles that'll get people, uh, and it's like, I don't know if that I want to do that.
Hmm.
I'm just so far from YouTube being a revenue
Oh,
stream at all
yeah.
that I can't think about that being a future option. It'd be like, I don't want to put my eggs in that basket because it's like, I'm not super charismatic. I know that. I don't know if I want that to be like, I like making YouTube videos just because I want to make them. If my
Hmm.
money, like my ability to pay my mortgage was tied to the success of the videos, that might ruin it. Right. So it's like,
Hmm.
I've kind of dabbled back and forth on that. It's like, am I good being, the niche guy?
Yeah.
Or do I want to try to find that like super sweet spot of clickable videos that also include the little high level tidbits enough to keep the good lifter coming back? Because at the end of the day, to me, that really matters a lot, right? It matters to me that guys like my
Right.
that I view as like my peers.
Hmm.
But it also isn't lucrative.
That's a really great point. And another thing that I respect about them, and this is something that I personally really don't want to do at all, and like why channels like Juggernaut, Chad Wesley Smith, and some of these channels, they have a lot of subs, but they don't post that frequently, and then they're not really trying to. And part of the
Jug has started doing the short spam.
they did.
Yeah.
Okay, because like, but I know for like a while there's some of these channels where like they were big and they catered to like a very specific thing and they got really big. They had that mass appeal, but also that good amount. But the thing is, they didn't constantly have to remake videos so frequently. And I feel like when you look at a channel, fuck it, like Athlete X, where they're just recreating problems for new lifters because a new lifter just thinks everything that they don't know is just, well, kind of is, but like they hyperfixate on problems, they create new problems in their own mind and
Yeah.
whatnot, and they create all these like new boogeymen, and then he has all these new video ideas now, and like I kind of
Yeah.
appreciate that these channels like don't do that at all, and I love that.
When I think that's something that's nice about not, I don't want to say pandering because it sounds condescending. When like those are the people get people into the sport.
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing bad to say about it. But appealing to the beginner,
Mm-hmm.
there's only a couple things that you really need to hammer home to a beginner, and then past those couple of things, you are going to off-put people with needless complexity.
Mm-hmm.
So you see this issue where like some of these guys who do make more beginner-centric content start having to repeat the same things like once a year,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems miserable. Uh,
Yeah, I don't want to.
Whereas when we start looking at higher level stuff, the higher the level, the more complexity, right? So it's like I've got, aside from myself, I'm coaching 3 guys with 800-pound deadlifts, and
Mm-hmm.
all 3 of them have tons of different variables going on. So I can just put like, if I'm adjusting one of their programs because we had a bad block, I can then get an idea about a video for like different variable management or different
Mm-hmm.
like small technical adjustment. There's an endless number of like when we start getting into more advanced issues, there is an endless number of topics we can cover.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason that like Juggernaut and John Meadows never really had to start repeating videos is because they're so familiar with high level stuff, they can keep putting different spins on the intermediate level stuff. Like maybe John makes one food selection video where he's talking about like how cheap it is. Maybe he makes one food selection video where he's talking about, I had a hard time gaining weight. I have a hard time eating enough. Here are tricks I found for getting down the food. That's a different question about like you could have a top 3 protein sources for money. You could have a top 3 protein sources for ease of caloric, like getting enough calories. You
Mm-hmm.
could make one for micronutrient density, right? And you can start like when you have that high level information, you can start like you never have to necessarily repeat something. Maybe you choose to because you have a bunch of new subs that haven't seen the old shit. It's like I've mulled that over. I've got some old videos that are really bad, but the ideas are good.
Mm-hmm.
That they only got 200 views. I've got 3K subs now. I probably average 8 or 900 views on an average video. So I'm like, okay, that automatically means there's a bunch of people who haven't seen this one. Maybe I should remake this video with a higher quality, maybe add in some new thoughts to expose my new audience to it. And that's fine. But you don't have to just recycle the same videos because there's nothing else to do. I
Mm,
think that's like a uniquely beginner centric problem
mhm.
uh, that thankfully like we can avoid.
Yeah, definitely. And then that actually is, it's funny that you bring that up because that's a question I wanted to ask you. Is there a video that you wish more people like was there a video with a message that you wish more people like heard or like would be aware of?
Oh man, my on my YouTube account, I think I have watch later folder
Mm.
that has about 800 videos in it. And what I do is if I find a video that I think has some points that I think were very good for me to think about, that are very productive for my training, I
Hmm.
throw them in my watch later.
Hmm.
So that way, if I can't find anything that I think is good to watch while I eat, I will cycle through my watch later, right? Because it's just like doing the same workout twice doesn't mean it's useless. Watching the same video twice doesn't mean it's useless, even though it's a little boring. Especially if
Hmm.
you're doing something, if you're doing something else both times, you're not focused on it. You might like, oh, this gives me an idea. So I'll watch like these videos from like 6 years ago that are just like general training discussion that I think is good to get myself thinking about. Uh, Max loves. There's this video by Bryce Krawczyk, who runs Calgary Barbell.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's good powerlifting channel. He has a video. I think it's called "No Sexy Answers."
Mm.
It's exactly what you were talking about earlier. Just like it's the same point. You really just want to beat like these overly analytical beginners over the head with. There isn't a sexy. You're looking for a sexy answer. There isn't one. I thought that was one of the most like poignant. Like just like it was just like the angst of upper level, intermediate, and advanced lifters being asked questions all poured
All the
into a
time, yeah.
video. It's a good one. Trying to think if the scientific principles of strength training videos. You can't go wrong with those, even if
Hmm.
you don't program based strictly off of like this if then scientific principles framework, which you can, but you don't have to.
Hmm.
I still think that watching those is really good. Going back through some of the old RTS videos that are just like Mike Tusher talking over some training footage. If you're a little bit more advanced and you're like thinking about this stuff, some of some of those have some good things for you to mull over. There is a full hour and some long video of a Stan Efforting seminar breaking down the vertical diet on, I forget his name is Dennis something or other. He's a former Germany's strongest man.
Mm.
It's like 5 or 6 years old, so it's not the updated vertical diet, but you can kind of get the basis of the diet from that full lecture for free on the internet. I think that one is very much worth a watch. Uh, if you look up Evan Centopani diet, he's got a couple of videos kind of going about his approach to nutrition. There's a lot of overlap with the vertical diet. There's some like dissection from it, and I would tell most people to, hey, if you go watch the vertical diet video, you go watch Evan's video, you can kind of get the basis for how I approach dieting for all of my athletes. You can
Mm.
kind of get the lion's share of it just from those videos. Um, I would watch a video on sleep hygiene. There's one by the guy who's like the sleep doctor, whatever the hell his name is. He's the guy who wrote the big book on it, who does a bunch of like TED talks and interviews. But I think those would be the ones that come to top of my head, uh, and my videos.
Hell yeah. Yeah, dude. Like I love like if I don't know what to do, like what to watch, like if I'm eating, doing cardio, I'm just like, oh, I'll just go to Sam's channel. There's
I
like
I try to
probably
post often.
something. Yeah, so it's like I just love watching your stuff. Like I don't comment enough because like I said, I'm just like flabbergasted and just like thinking, you know?
Well, thank you for watching it, man. I just like that people watch them.
Yeah, for sure. So we're about 3 hours in. Like I think that's about the limit of even the most
Yeah,
like
I was gonna say you might want to chop this one in two.
right, yeah. So what would you say? I know you kind of mentioned it earlier, but like now that we're kind of wrapping up, what would you say is like the central like purpose or ethos of your channel and what you're trying to get across to people?
I mentioned in my video the other day how I was like, I would like to just help the people I kind of view as the other guys going along this journey with me, present them with stuff that can help them moving along. But that is a lot more self-aggrandizing than what I am actually doing. I just make videos because I find it reasonably enjoyable. Makes me smile when people like them. And I'm selfish. I really like. I don't think much.
Mhm.
I think I come off like I think, but I don't. Like I just am on autopilot most days. Like, I eat my meals, do coaching, eat my meals, train, eat my meals, walk the dog, eat my meals, go to bed. It's a good life for me, but I don't spend much time thinking. So I can't say I've ever like put too much introspection. Why do I do the YouTube? Why does it mean? Why does it mean something to me?
Mhm.
I make videos because I want to. If I didn't like making videos anymore, I would stop at a heartbeat. So I think that tells me that I don't have great under art. Like it's like if you have a good reason for something, you'll do it when you don't want to.
Mhm.
I won't. If I don't want to, I won't do it.
Yeah. But hey man, like like I do respect that, and I think that's great. And like I think regardless of um the intentions or feelings around it, you like the impact that you're having on us like lifters and like the guys who like really do take this seriously. I think it's great. I think your channel is like a wonderful resource, especially for myself. So thank you so much. Like it's an honor. I would love to
Oh,
do this
I have
again.
a
And yeah.
suggestion. All right, everybody listening to this, Sam, had a very smart idea. I think we should probably just get like a Skype call together with me, Mr. Stan Strength, maybe get basement bodybuilding into it. I could definitely harass Paris into doing it. And we could just get like someone could toss up like a community post, and we could do like a roundtable Q&A, because I think
Mm,
that would be potentially valuable, especially with like how far apart me and basement bodybuilding are. I think like I'm not going to go argue with him because we have different goals, and
yeah.
I'd imagine he agrees with me and I agree with him. But I think it'd be really cool, to like have whatever question. We could probably just take the most liked questions. Uh, and just give like different perspectives on it, because I think that could be really helpful for people to be like, okay, well, there isn't a definite answer. Uh, I'm sure a lot of people will be like, oh, well, Paris is my favorite. I'm just going to do whatever Paris said. But I think we could do that. It could be some fun. Try to make it like a every other week kind of thing.
Yeah, that'd be awesome, man. And
You ever
yes.
seen